Sometime in the fall of 1968, a simple majority vote is taken. It goes 3-2. These guys have no idea at the time, but this vote will set off a chain reaction that makes them one of the most influential bands in rock and roll history. Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is a very special episode of Vinyl Monday. The MC5 were a rock and roll group based out of Detroit, Michigan. The classic era lineup consisted of Wayne Kramer and Fred Sonic Smith, both on guitar, Robin Tyner on vocals, Michael Davis on bass, and Dennis Machine Gun Thompson on drums. The Five, as I will be referring to them most in this video, were together from 1964-ish to late 1972. That time together was brief, but very eventful. In their heyday, they opened for some of the biggest bands of the 60s, sold out venues on their own, and arguably, accidentally invented punk rock. This is the shortest version of their history. However, the true story is much, much bigger than that. If this, by chance, is your first time on this channel, you have picked one hell of a week! Vinyl Monday is usually the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. If deep dives aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, and on TikTok. If you've been around here for long, you've likely picked up on two of my favorite hobbies: plotting and scheming. Everything is a game with me. I post hints over on my community tab and across my social media for what album I'll be covering next. For the past 10 months, I have been secretly writing, researching, editing, filming, and hinting at this video. The MC5 have been the backdrop to everything I've done on this channel. Literally. Their albums were hiding in plain sight in my backdrop. You can go back, watch all of those old videos. They're always there. I've been hinting at this video for so long, and none of you picked up on it! 10 months of secret work, all leading up to today, the 55th anniversary of the MC5's defining album. Before we get any farther into this video, I do have to address the existence of MC5 A True Testimonial. This was/is a documentary film completed in 2002. I've also seen the 2004 date flying around, and this was supposed to be the definitive narrative of the MC5. Keyword: was. In the 21 years since its intended release, A True Testimonial has been bootlegged to hell. You can find it if you know where to look. However, this is me saying for legal reasons that you shouldn't bootleg because it is illegal and also wrong. If it got a commercial release now in 2023, A True Testimonial would be obsolete. It's been bootlegged for so long that its once exclusive information has been entirely absorbed into the Five's narrative. So with this video, I seek to craft the Lost Films companion piece. This is far and away my most ambitious project to date, more than when I wrote 2 undergrad theses at once. That was insane. Why did I do that? This video will be the Vinyl Monday format on hard drugs. I have no idea how long this will be. My best estimate is around 2 hours. There's 40 pages of notes. 40 pages. I'll be telling the story of the MC5 my way, through the music, reviews of all 3 of their studio albums, plus 2 notable bootleg compilations, and a healthy dose of hyperbole. A little bit of shouting, a good amount of running gags, no filter, plenty of audio jokes, no gravitas, no first-hand information, just hubris, and above all, a deep love of the music and the men who made it. Without further ado, here is a brief history of my favorite band. The story of the MC5, in most any conventional narrative you'll hear, begins with Wayne Kramer. His early life was far from stable. His family moved around a lot, eventually settling in Lincoln Park, one of the poorest suburbs of Detroit. His father was a shell-shocked, alcoholic war vet who left when Wayne was little, so he was primarily raised by a single mother. His mother was a career woman, tough as nails, owned a few beauty parlors around the city. Now, one of his mom's boyfriends played the guitar and sang. Wayne never liked him, but this guy would bring his friends over and they'd all have jam sessions in the living room. Little Wayne loved this. Not long after, he first heard Chuck Berry, Dwayne Eddy, Link Wray, and Little Richard. He caught the bug. He originally wanted to play the drums, but then he noticed the girls all paid attention to the guy with the guitar. So naturally, he switches over to the guitar. He was a lifelong troublemaker too. On the last day of 8th grade, he gift-wrapped a box of literal actual dog shit and left it on his mean teacher's desk. Incredible, no notes. As a boy in Detroit in the 50s and 60s, you were either gonna grow up and work in an auto factory or grow up and work in an auto factory. Wayne did not want to do this. He didn't want to go to college either. He never liked school. What he really wanted to do was start a band. When he puts the word out, he hears this kid Fred Smith can play an instrument. That instrument turned out to be the bongos. What the hell is he gonna do with this? Play Harry Belafonte? No disrespect to Harry Belafonte. Rest in peace to the king. Fred's dad was from the South, so there was a guitar in the house. Wayne teaches Fred how to play some chords. He takes to it like a fish to water, and over time, on his own accord, not just as something fun to do with his friend, he becomes a kick-ass rhythm guitarist. Fred was another rebellious kid with a troubled home life. He went to live with Wayne and his mom and sister for a while. This only made their bond stronger. Fred had a wicked sense of humor, and we always had fun together. We made a pact to defend each other if we got into trouble. It was a lot of teenage macho posturing, but we meant it. Make no mistake, they got each other into trouble too. They got into some shit at a Who concert. A local kid, Scott Ashton, had to save them from getting their asses beat. They picked a fight at a Who concert in the 60s. What did they think was gonna happen? Fred dated Scott's little sister for a while. Instant friendship formed. Fred was blunt, defiant, sarcastic. He questioned authority whenever he could. By all accounts, he was counterculture before counterculture was a thing. As a boy growing up in Detroit, Wayne naturally had a love of cars and drag racing. He took any and every opportunity to go down to the track. Once he couldn't drag a grown-up along with him, he got a job selling ice cream, just so he had the excuse to be there every weekend. He'd go to the track with one of the neighborhood kids, Ricky DeMiner. Ricky introduces Wayne to his older brother, Bob. Bob was the cool kid in town, but not in an actually cool way. He was the cool form of uncool before uncool was a thing. He was a beatnik through and through, all about jazz and Eastern philosophy. He also stole a flute, a saxophone, and a whole-ass cello from the high school band room. How do you make off with a whole-ass cello? Wayne described Bob as the first natural intellectual he'd ever met. He was a few years older, but they'd talk about the world and God and shit. Bob had this gentle, humorous teaching style, and Wayne had a wealth of follow-up questions. Taurus and Sagittarius are such an underrated duo for this reason. If you've been around here long, you'll know those are my two favorite sun signs, so when you put them together, perfection. They'd talk philosophy, politics, and culture. Bob had strange ideas about the world, challenging ideas, but he was the kind of strange that you wanted to listen to. Wayne tries convincing him to be in one of his bands. He'd formed the Bounty Hunters while still in high school, but Bob wasn't interested. He liked jazz and blues, Charlie Parker, Charles Mingus, Cannonball Adderley, Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane, Muddy Waters, and a hell of a lot of John Lee Hooker. So Wayne settles for Bob as the manager. This doesn't work out because, well, Bob has no idea how to manage a band. A little later on, he plays bass, but he flakes on that too. As Wayne grew up, he was profoundly affected by James Brown. He saw him doing his thing on TV and in movies and said, that's it. That's what I want to do. Wayne was always aware of the foundations of rock and roll being black. He'd sincerely thank anyone who said his playing sounded like colored music. He gets his license and he buys a motorcycle. Why a motorcycle? Well, for one, he's a teenage boy and hasn't had a single practical thought in his life, but mostly because girls love a guy with a motorcycle. For his whole life, Wayne has either done things A, for the plot, or B, for the girlies, and I love it. One night, he rolls up to a White Castle on his motorcycle, and who does he find there but Bob DeMiner, drunk as fuck and playing the harmonica. Wayne's like, hey, what are you playing the harmonica for? I thought you were a jazz guy. I've discovered this band. The Rolling Stones, man. This shit is happening. He's also gotten into the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, but I guess that didn't come up in this drunk-ass conversation. Yeah, we'll talk about this in the morning. See you tomorrow, man. After Bob sobers up, Wayne introduces him to Fred, and they all drive around aimlessly in Bob's Chevy, as teenagers do. One night, they all end up at this diner. The topic of how they should carry themselves as a band comes up, in far less articulate terms, I'm sure. Fred's all like, we need to throw our weight around, we gotta be real rock and rollers, rough people up in the parking lot and shit. And he knocks a glass off the table to prove his point. Bob's like, listen man, we can throw our weight around, but we don't have to do that. We gotta be cool. Nuh-uh. Yeah-huh! Parking lot, right now, let's go! We haven't even ordered yet, I wanted to eat, oh my god! Wayne runs out into the parking lot where Fred and Bob are actively throwing hands. This went from 0 to 100 for no reason other than testosterone. Fred's about to make the gap in Bob's teeth even wider, like, I could f you up right now! And Bob just goes, yeah? Why don't you? Fight's over. Epiphanies had, intellect has entered the chat. With Bob on board as the singer, 3 times as the charm I guess, Wayne finally has a lineup. A singer, 2 guitarists, Pat Burrows on bass and Bob Gasper on drums. As the front man, Bob had the responsibility of handling the PA system. All he really had to remember was red wire's hot, black wire's not. Black goes to calm. Black to calm. The guys were constantly gigging, like 3 or 4 nights a week, taking shows wherever they could. This is a little later on, but Wayne even skipped his high school graduation to go play another high school graduation. They gradually worked their way up until December 11th, 1965. The 5 opened for... The 5? The other 5. The Dave Clark 5 at Cobo Arena in Detroit. This show was notable for a few reasons. Number 1 being, it's the MC5 opening for the Dave Clark 5. That's objectively hilarious. Number 2, Bob DeMiner turned 21 the next day. Happy birthday, Bob. And number 3, this show might have been the last with the original lineup. Pat Burrows and Bob Gasper left shortly after this. What was their final straw? A little song called Black to Calm. So up until now, the guys are basically a really, really good cover band, but their original material is getting heavier. Fred comes up with this riff, this one chord that he just hammers away on. One day at rehearsal, Wayne set his guitar down a little bit too close to the amp. He goes upstairs to take a piss or something, hears this terrible shriek from downstairs, and a glass jar exploding. He discovered feedback. This was the sound he was looking for. This head-splitting riff by Fred and this awful noise Wayne was now wielding like a battle axe came together to form the Five's first signature song. Pat was like, what the f*** is this Black to Calm shit? I'm not playing this shit. Goodbye. Thankfully, Wayne already had another guy on deck. Michael Davis was a friend of Bob DeMiner's. They lived in the same apartment building. Wayne and Michael are fast friends. They spend a whole summer going to the lake and driving around together, being each other's wingmen. Again, Taurus and Gemini, such an underrated duo. Mike lived in New York for a while. He played Dylan tunes on the guitar and sang. He was chill, charming, objectively quite good looking, and he was Wayne's first plug. Mike was undoubtedly the biggest pothead of them all, with his high-potency African ganja and hash to boot. Basically, he infiltrated the Five and turned them all into his fellow stoner degenerates. Oh, and he'd tell girls that his name was Michel Dubois, so girls would think he was European. Wayne needs a bassist, he teaches Mike to play. Bob Gasper leaves the band to get a big boy job at the bank or whatever. Enter... how does one describe Dennis? Dennis truly, genuinely scares me. Do you have any idea how hard it is for me to be intimidated by a man? He's really fucking smart, for one. Book smart, and to call him a live wire is the understatement of the century. Dennis caught the rock and roll bug from his older brother. They're 10 years apart, and the elder Tomic brother was already playing in bands. Little 4-year-old Denny boy would sneak down into the basement when his brother wasn't looking and play around on the drum kit. The younger Tomic grows up to become a working musician too, ending up in the Bounty Hunters with Wayne at one point. That was how they knew each other. One day, Wayne rolls up to Dennis's place on his motorcycle like, "Hey man, Gasper just quit. You should come audition at the Crystal Bar." The Crystal was one of the Five's regular gigs, and man was this place the pits. Their audience was the same 3 drunks every week. Dennis doesn't have to audition, really. He shows up and is just kinda in the band, and he was christened with the ceremonial toilet plunger. They had a ceremonial toilet plunger. You can't make this shit up! Before long, Dennis was faced with a choice because he was the only guy going to college while he was in the band. He has to decide, do I stay in school, be an engineer, have a big boy job, do math or whatever? Or do I do what I've been doing since I was a kid and play the drums? For now, he chooses both, juggling his band duties with his course load at Wayne State. So we've got Wayne, Fred, Dennis, Mike, and... oh, by the way, there's some name changes happening around here. Wayne Kramer wasn't always Wayne Kramer. He changed his last name to Kramer to stick it to his dad for leaving, and because Kramer sounded like an American consumer product. Like cheese or vacuum cleaners. Okay. Fred added Sonic to his name. It was very nearly Bartholomew, courtesy of Bob, but Fred shot that one down so fast. Dennis became Machine Gun Thompson. Mike was Mick Davies for a minute there. I guess that was his British sona. As for Bob, he adopts the surname of Coltrane's pianist. Bob becomes Rob, and that's right. Bob DeMiner transforms into Rob Tyner. In late 1965, the MC5, as we know it, was born. Dennis said the personalities in the Five were just diverse enough where we had a blend that created this whole circle. A circle never really closes. Then he starts talking about numbers and God and acid and shit. All accounts settle on Rob coming up with the band's name. He went with MC5 because it sounded mechanical, industrial, like Detroit. It sounded like a car part. MC could have stood for anything, really, not just Motor City. Sometimes it was, oh my god, I love writing these videos. If I could just write the videos and know that my jokes would be delivered right, I would. Sometimes MC stood for marijuana consumers, or more cock, or even Mongolian clusterfuck. The Mongolian clusterfuck 5, man! Wait, why does that actually work? The 5 gig non-stop. Block parties, VFW halls, school dances, barbecues, record hops. They even played someone's wedding. They earned a devoted local following through working hard and sometimes playing for free. They'd play for hours after their set was supposed to end because people loved them and wanted them to. One night at a party at Betty Kahn's house, they jammed on Hang On Sloopy for 45 minutes straight. I love that song, but dear God, I can't imagine what a 45-minute Hang On Sloopy would sound like. They played for so long that Rob lost his voice, so he switched to his harmonica, and he played that for so long that his mouth bled. With nothing left to do, he took one look at his mic, one look at the PA, and just kinda... And now Rob has discovered feedback. This is 66 Breakout, a compilation of bootlegs and home recordings assembled by Wayne in the 90s. It's been re-released on streaming as Volume 1 of the Music for the American Revolution compilations. This is the first of 2 compilations I will be showing you in this video. I bought this from Dumb Records on Discogs. They sent along the cutest little note with it and like drew things on the note that were invented in my state, so like thank you to whoever made that. That was so sweet. Here's the thing about being an MC5 fan. You have to get used to some seriously recording quality. The vast majority of recordings we have were made by kids in the crowds. I'm choosing to spotlight 66 Breakout because it's very much representative of the kind of music the 5 were playing in their beginnings. We have a very early iteration of Looking at You. This was a staple of their sets, co-written by Fred, Mike, and Rob. Look What You've Done is an all-time great Rob vocal performance, which is just a slap in the face considering it was a rehearsal in Wayne's basement. There's a little rendition of Baby Please Don't Go on here, made famous by the Amboy Dukes, Ted Nugent's band, another Detroit connection, and the Yardbirds' I'm a Man, a tune which Wayne said created more electric guitar nutcases than any track in the history of recorded music. Before the guys take the airwaves by storm, they gotta figure out a look. As you could probably tell from the cover of 66 Breakout, Beatle hair was the thing. Mike had that style down pat, his hair texture was perfect for it. Dennis has it easy because he has naturally straight hair too. Fred's rocking some serious Brian Jones hair though, because he's cool like that, and it looks great with his Gretsch and his Rickenbacker. Wayne resorts to plastering his curls down with gel, but since he's not doing his greaser hair anymore, it just looks weird. Rob has to go drastic. His hair texture wasn't just curly, it was kinky. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Somewhere along the way, Rob met a girl and he did the dorkiest thing you could imagine a future rock star to do. He fell in love and got married. Without telling the other guys, of course. They would have given him so much if they knew. Like, what the hell, man? We're trying to be rock stars and you're chasing domestic bliss? I'm not jealous at all. Anyway, the barbershop route doesn't work for Rob, so his wife, Becky, tries setting it with her rollers. This sufficed for a little while, but as the gigs went on, Rob would sweat a lot. And when he sweat, his hair would just go poof. I know your pain, man. There's this new guy on the scene over in England, Jimi Hendrix. Seeing Jimi inspired Rob to embrace his natural hair texture. He grows this big, beautiful afro. All the other psych rock guys had to go to the hairdressers and get perms for theirs, like Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding, but Rob was all natural, baby. That hair was God's gift to women, but mostly this one. Wayne follows Rob's lead and sets his curls free too. The Five's first single was One of the Guys, backed with a cover of Van Morrison's I Can Only Give You Everything. It was supposed to be Gloria, but the shadows of night beat them to releasing it. Release the MC5 cover of Gloria! After some trouble with club promoters and holding down a steady manager, in late 1966, the Five cross paths with Russ Gibb. Yeah, the Paul is dead guy? He plays a big role in this story. At this point in our story, the Grande Ballroom hasn't been touched since it was built in the 1930s, but Uncle Russ had a vision. He was a teacher by day, a DJ at WKNR, and a promoter by night. Heavy into the Detroit music scene. He saw what Bill Graham's Fillmore did for the San Francisco scene, and he knew Detroit could have something similar. So when the Grande went up for auction in I think the spring of '66, Russ bought it. He turned it into a concert venue, and it was kind of perfect. The Grande was built in the 30s for big bands, so the acoustics were amazing. He hires the MC5 as the first house band. Oh gosh, where's my beep? Technical difficulties, please stand by. Beep boop boop beep bop. Oh no, my copy of Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Oh no, I'm such an intellectual. There's my copy of Please Kill Me, the Uncensored Oral History of Punk. Wayne had to say about the Grande, you could wear what you wanted, you could smoke a joint, no one gave a damn. People danced, people were allowed to express themselves, all kinds of people came. White people, black people, brown people, neighborhood people, kids from the suburbs, everybody could go there and feel good about being there. Downstairs, there was a workshop/rehearsal space called, well, the Artist's Workshop. It was a haven for artists like Gary Grimshaw, who drew the posters, Carl Lundgren too. The Five's first roadie, Emil Basila, operated business out of there too. He takes a photo in a few years that becomes a problem. And Lenny Sinclair. All of the most iconic photos of the Five, every single one of them, all of them were taken by Lenny Sinclair. This photo, this is American history. I have encountered people who've never heard of the MC5 and they've seen this photo. As a woman traversing the world of rock and roll, especially the very dude bro history of proto-punk, whatever that is, I just think it's so cool that so much of my favorite band was captured through the eyes and lens of a woman. After a little while of calling the Grande and the Artist's Workshop home, being surrounded by psychedelic freaks all day, Wayne decided he needed to refresh his wardrobe. Whew. Much better. Wayne has a vision of sparkly outfits while, what else, tripping on acid. He gets a hold of a silver sequin jacket, not this one was black, and it starts a domino effect among the guys, not unlike Rob and his natural hair. Rob turns to his wife, Becky. She teaches herself how to sew. And now Rob had these beautiful outfits. Satin, jacquard, lame, big billowing sleeves, striped vests and bell-bottoms, whites, purples, greens, yellows, silver, and gold, gold, gold. Lots of gold. There was a fur vest, a fur coat that I can't decide if it's ugly or iconic. The all-red suit was absolutely horrendous. Becky is a saint for letting him run around like that. He had this leather suit. Back then, you had to hand sew all that mess. That suit I like. And, of course, his shiny disco pirate shirts. Actually made this one myself. I studied some of the patterns of the shirts he wore and kind of spliced together my own. You're gonna see a few things that I've made through this video. The great forgotten rock and roll mystery that keeps me up at night is whatever happened to Rob's shiny disco pirate shirts. He had about 3 of them. They were all stunning. Literally, no one cares about these shirts but me. Anyway, Becky teaches Fred's wife Sigrid how to sew. She makes him these Western style shirts. He had this pink one he wore with a neon green suit. He also wore this insane zebra print number. Fred's style was way out there, as we'll see a little later on. As for the single men of the group, they sourced their fashions from the backbone of rock and roll, the groupies. Through 1967, the Five wove themselves into Detroit hippie culture and its leader, John Sinclair. Now, John was a pretty out there guy. He's got this hippie commune, Trans Love Energies, get you there on time, set up in an old dentist's office. The guys actually got off on the wrong foot with him. Picture this. John's just gotten out of jail, he hasn't seen his family in 6 months, he just wants to sleep in his own bed. He finally gets home to this wonderful party, but it's 3 o'clock in the goddamn morning, and there are these 5 crazy people who call themselves a rock and roll band terrorizing his basement. I don't know about you, but I'd be pissed. I just want to sleep, man. Lenny had to go down there and physically pull the plug on the Five so they wouldn't get a noise complaint and land John back in jail. He's so peeved he complains about the Five to a local counterculture publication called Fifth Estate. Remember this for later. But they iron things out over, what else? Weed and jazz music. Some think John elevated the Five to greatness, others think he was the downfall of the band. I simply think that the MC5 were best when they had a sense of direction. They had something to funnel all of that energy into. Basically, they were best when they had something to say. And they had that when they had John. Around this time, they get into avant-garde jazz, especially Sun Ra. Their sound is shifting to reflect this new influence. See that little song, Black to Calm. This is how it sounded in late 65, early 66, right? This is how it sounded on Detroit's PBS affiliate station in October of 67.
Those of us in the studio now know how the Marines feel at the boundary line there in Vietnam when those North Vietnamese rocket shells come pouring in.
Yeah, I can't believe they let this go on for 13 minutes. I can't believe they got booked in the first place. The Five were still having serious trouble holding down a manager. No one wanted to be liable for these acid freak-out hooligans, except for John. He had connections in the scene, and he was a freak just like them. John refuses to call himself a manager, but that's basically what he is. It's all fun and games until Detroit's attempt at a love-in. Keyword, attempt. John and his merry band of hippies organize a love-in at Belle Isle. Thousands of people descend on the island and the river to dance, paint, smoke reefer, and generally have a good and chill time. Detroit police did not want them to have a fun or chill time. They raided the place with the riot squad. This senseless violence went down on Wayne's 19th birthday, and it profoundly affected him. You could say it radicalized him. John took it personally too. That was our relationship with the police. We hated them. When black people rose up against the police, nobody could have been happier than us. As Wayne has said in like every interview he's given for the past 25 years, the Summer of Love didn't make a stop in Detroit. Now, as a lifelong New Englander, yes, I am a New Englander, not Michigan like a fair amount of you have assumed in the past, there's very little, if anything, I understand about the nuances of Detroit. From what I've gathered, racism runs deep in its history, but so does black culture. Funk, soul, Motown, rock and roll, blues. Once upon a time, the culture of this city was rich and beautiful. Until July 21st, 1967, when a bust at a nightclub threw a match into the pool of lit gasoline that was Detroit. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to tell you something. I hear a lot of talk by a lot of honkies sitting on a lot of money telling me they're high society. But I'd like to know something. If you ask me, this is the high society. This is the high society. In a week of rioting incited by Detroit police, 43 people died, thousands were injured, and virtually half the city burned down. This caused billions of dollars in damage. Order wasn't restored until LBJ sent in the Army National Guard. Blues king John Lee Hooker witnessed all of this and wrote his classic, The Motor City is Burning. As told by Wayne, one of the great American cities was scarred forever. Tanks and armored personnel carriers were patrolling the streets I grew up on. The city was at war with itself for a week. I can only imagine what Korea or the Battle for Hughes City was like. I know what Detroit was like. It was some fucked up shit. Detroit has never recovered. Detroit is the way it is today in our year of the Lord 2023, in part because of Detroit police in 1967. In the middle of the rioting, John Sinclair put up a big banner on the roof of the commune that said, "Burn, baby, burn." They immediately realized this was a terrible decision, took it down, but it was too late. Police already saw it. Riot squad showed up claiming there was a sniper on the roof. That was bullshit. They raided the commune. That was bullshit too. Sinclair and Company's little banner stunt gave Detroit police the perfect excuse to harass the shit out of them. Police were shining floodlights in their windows at night. The band's gear mysteriously went missing. They were busted for obscenity, possession, incitement, profanity, possession again, literally whatever they could come up with to throw John, and now any of the MC5 in jail. Eventually the FBI got involved, their phones were getting tapped, their van got fucking firebombed! Things were just way, way too hot to stay in Detroit. So, in 1968, John rounded up trans love and moved them out to a mansion in Ann Arbor. Things were chill in Ann Arbor for like 5 seconds. The CIA building got blown up. During all of this, the Five are still gigging like crazy. They're still the house band of the Grande, opening for all the biggest bands of the time, and regularly blowing them out of the water. Lots of explosions in this chapter. The Five share a bill with the Trogs and write a way hornier spin-off tune of Wild Thing called I Want You Right Now. The Experience never played the Grande, but they did play the Masonic Temple with the Five. Dennis says he made a short joke to Mitch Mitchell's face. Listen, Mitch is one of my favorite drummers, but if that isn't something I would do. One of the best recordings we have of Cream is from their night at the Grande in '67. They were terrified of the Five. I guess when Jack and Ginger weren't fistfighting each other, the MC5 was fistfighting them. Big fat allegedly with this one because I've never seen anything to corroborate this, but for obvious reasons I have to inform you of this. Rob Tyner may or may not have beat up Eric Clapton. Do I figure out time travel and accidentally cause this? I think I figure out time travel and accidentally cause this. But we do have Rob on record saying this much about Cream. They're lucky we didn't shoot them. Robert Wayne DeMiner! The only British band that could hold a candle to these little hellions were a gaggle of little hellions called The Who. The Five did not go down easy, though. They terrorized the Grande for an hour, played 3 encores, and trashed their gear at the end. They didn't have the money to be trashing their gear. What were they thinking? Yeah, after that night, The Who refused to be on a bill with the MC5 unless they were opening for the MC5. They opened for American bands when they rolled through as well, like Big Brother and the Holding Company. Fred and Janice apparently had a thing. He liked her because she was the only woman who could go shot for shot with him. One night, Sam Andrew messed up the same part over and over again during sound check, so the Five start heckling him. Get off the stage, man! Kick out the jams! Or get off the stage! With more resources at their disposal, the Five became known for their Vox Beetle amps, or rather, for blowing them up.
And now for something completely different.
They had about 4 of these things, 2 for the stage and 2 in the shop being repaired, because they'd just play these 100-volt amps on 10 until they were spewing blue smoke. The amps were on constant rotation until they were repoed, because in the 2 years they'd had them, neither Fred nor Wayne made a single payment. Dennis's drums just aren't mic'd, so he's fighting for his life as is. Things only get worse when Thing 1 and Thing 2 graduate to Marshall amps that pump 200 volts. Ultimately, a band is only as good as their drummer, and this challenge forced Dennis to go from good to great. He changes the way he plays entirely, learning tricks from the school of Keith Moon. But this greatness came with a price tag. Dennis is breaking cymbals left and right just to be heard over Thing 1 and Thing 2. Friend of the band Jesse Crawford's job during gigs was to crouch behind the kit and hand Dennis another drumstick every time he broke one, which was at least 5 times a show. He got pissed about breaking his gear when Rob kept looking at you going for like 10 minutes while Dennis was on his 5th or 6th set of sticks. He'd have a temper tantrum and chuck a stick at Rob like, for the love of God, end the song, you're killing me back here. Rob refined his uber theatrical stage shtick to front this insanity. He'd flail about, end up on the ground. Sometimes his belt would come off and he'd swing that around too. On one occasion, tour manager Steve Hardeneck rushed the stage with a prop gun and Rob pretended to be shot. Fake blood and everything. This is theater kid behavior. He was a menace for that. It seems Mike was the only guy with even an ounce of chill on the stage. He was the much needed ground wire amidst all of that. All he really needed to do was play his bass and look good while doing it, which really wasn't hard for him at all. The 5 tour through the Midwest and East Coast, building an audience outside Detroit. Through this, they form a loose relationship with the motherfuckers. Yeah, you know where this is going now. And they cinch a cover story in Rolling Stone magazine written by Eric Ehrman. It wouldn't be published until January of '69, and I happen to have a copy. Highlights include correctly predicting Janis Joplin's Cosmic Blues Band, the Altamont Free Show disaster. Oh god, and accidentally predicting the hilarious downfall of Jan Wenner. Melanie's full birth chart is in here, an ad for the weirdest, wackiest, most wonderful album to come out of 1968, The Fool's Self-Titled, and as far as the 5 spot goes, there's mention of something called a Cosmic Wiggle Guitar, and this gorgeous cover shot of Rob. If I recall correctly, Baron Woolman took this. He's one of my favorite photographers of the 60s. I would commit crimes to see outtakes of this shoot. The article is mostly bullshit. It spells Wayne's name wrong more than once, but it mentions some new original songs they've incorporated into their repertoire, like Upper Egypt, Ice Pick Slim, and of particular note, Starship. It's heavily influenced by Sun Ra, even lists him as a co-writer because some lyrics came from a poem he wrote. This period, from the back half of '67 through the early half of '68, was the best it ever was for the MC5. I hate to burst your bubble with however long we have left of this video, but it is quite literally all downhill from here. The media characterized the MC5 as a band of feral revolutionaries. These photos by Lenny Sinclair really didn't help, but being on the front lines of a cultural revolution wasn't the Five's intention. It just kinda happened. John and Lenny were listening to a radio broadcast from Huey Newton, one of the founders of the Black Panthers. When Newton was asked what white people could do to help their cause, he said they could form their own organization of allies with similar ideals. Anti-racism, anti-establishment, environmentalism, a little communism. John said, hey, that sounds like us. At the same time, Pun-Plamondon read the Black Panther newspaper while he was in jail and got hip to the same thing. In the fall of 1968, the White Panther Party is established. Where did I put it? Oh my god, where did I put it? Ugh! Oh no. There we go. There. Now I really match with Rob. Here was the White Panther Party's 10-point program. This is a real trip, you guys. Number 1, full endorsement and support of Black Panther Party's 10-point program. Reasonable enough. Number 2, total assault on the culture by any means necessary, including rock and roll, dope, and fucking in the streets. Number 3, free exchange of energy and materials. We demand the end of money. Number 4, free food, clothes, housing, dope, music, bodies, medical care, everything free for everybody. Number 5, free access to information media. Free the technology from the greed creeps. I love that phrasing. Number 6, free time and space for all humans. Dissolve all unnatural boundaries. That's a little vague, but alright. Number 7, free all schools and all structures from corporate rule. Turn the buildings over to the people at once. Number 8, free all prisoners everywhere. They are your brothers. Number 9, free all soldiers at once. No more conscripted armies. And number 10, free the people from their leaders. Leaders suck. All power to the people. Freedom means free everyone. A lot of this is crazy, but a lot of this is also strangely relevant. Were the White Panthers much of Panthers at all? They mostly took the Panthers title because they thought the Black Panthers dressed cool. If anything, the White Panthers were more of an expression of frustration at the slow pace of social progress in Detroit. This is when the band Scott Ashton's in, you might have heard of them, a little band called the Stooges, and the MC5 splinter off. They just weren't about all of that. But the guys did still get the invite to Iggy's wedding. They ate none of the food, drank all of the alcohol, and got wasted. Side note, Dennis's one-sided beef with the Stooges is equal parts baffling and hysterical to listen to. In the decades following all of the White Panther craziness, everyone has at least partially rescinded the militant thing. They backed up the politics, let's keep that straight, but they all independently realized that violence was not, in fact, the answer. Even John himself thought the whole thing was nonsense after the fact, but in the moment, they all played into each other's energy. They all made each other really truly believe it. That militancy put an even bigger target on their backs for Detroit police and now the FBI. When it came to the MC5, the feds thought they were dealing with this dangerous, very far left movement, these hippies gone crazy, but that wasn't them. They weren't even really hippies. At the root of it all, these guys were just a bunch of stoners. Oh Christ, I almost forgot about Zenta. These guys got so high, they thought they formed a religion. There was not a sane brain in this band. So on August 25th, 1968, there was supposed to be a free concert at the DNC called the Festival of Life. The Five were the only band who showed up. They played on a trailer bed and ran all of their equipment through a single extension cord hooked up to a hot dog stand. That is the most MC5 thing I've ever heard. They played for 45-50 minutes before things started going sideways. There were undercover agents stirring up trouble in the crowd, picking fights. Meanwhile, the guys are so whacked out on hash cookies that they're harmonizing with the police choppers. Wayne's like, yeah, this is perfect, man. Wah! There's footage of this up on YouTube, by the way. I believe it was government surveillance. Fucking baller. Paddy wagons are rolling up. The place is surrounded. It's looking bad. Abby Hoffman, you know, the other Abby, who's definitely on a few watch lists, hops on the mic and starts doing his thing. The Five see this as their only opportunity to get the hell out of the park before it descends into a full-blown riot. They yeet all of their gear into the van and leave. John drove the Five's van out of Chicago like a war boy. As soon as the music was over, the violence began, and wait, the Five were the only band to show up? Yeah. Phil Oakes was there, but all the San Francisco bands, Big Brother and the Holding Company, bailed. Jefferson Airplane, bailed. Grateful Dead, crickets. The Five's other little brother band, The Up, arrived just as the Five were leaving. They pulled over The Up and were like, get out while you still can. Dennis said, I knew the revolution was over in that moment. I looked over my shoulder and no one else was there. Ever since hearing this account of the 68 DNC, I've respected the Five in a whole new way, but I also haven't looked at any of the San Francisco bands the same. They talked the talk with peace and love and all that, but the MC5, they walked the walk. They had the balls to put their money where their mouths were. This is Power Trip. This is the second of the compilations I wanted to show you. Half of Power Trip was recorded at the First Unitarian Church in Detroit in September of '68. This is the Five at their most feral and unhinged. This Black to Calm is the craziest the song ever got. The difference from this to this is mind-boggling. Are they even the same song? The free jazz style sax played by John, I think he put this together with his second wife Penny. That and whatever the hell this is are very much representative of the Sun Ra thing happening within the Five right now, but the star of Power Trip is this version of I Want You Right Now. It's, B-Roll Abby breaking fourth wall to bring you B-Roll Abby's B-Roll Jam. Today it is I Want You Right Now from the Power Trip bootleg. If I wasn't a Rob girly before hearing Power Trip I Want You Right Now, this definitely would have done me in. Another fantastic recording from this era is the Sturgis Armory show from June 27th, 1968. You can hear this on the Black to Calm and Are You Ready to Testify compilations, among many, many others. This is one of the more popular MC5 bootlegs. Sturgis bore a similarly insane iteration of Black to Calm and this killer rendition of Born Under a Bad Sign. I like it just as much as Albert King's. Power Trip was how the MC5 sounded when one Danny Fields rolled into town. Elektra was tipped off to the Five via two 16-year-olds named Bob Rudnick and Dennis Frawley. There are far too many Bobs, Dennises, and Johns in this story. Elektra sends Danny Fields out to Detroit to see what all the fuss is about. This night was every bit as chaotic and exciting as any good Five show should be. Plus, the Stooges were on the bill. After the show, John essentially kidnaps Danny for a raucous night hanging out with the White Panthers at Trans Love. He described the place as a Viking commune on Fraternity Row. Emphasis on Fraternity Row. If those walls could talk. Yeah, Trans Love was not some progressive utopia by any means. As much as these dudes patted themselves on the back for having some really forward-thinking ideals for the time, they admit the women in that house were treated like garbage. But what do you expect? It's a frat house. Trans Love HQ was the real-life Mojo Dojo Casa house. In the middle of all the Danny Fields hubbub, the guys approach Dennis like, hey man, there's this guy from Elektra here. It's looking like we're about to get signed. This is about to go to a whole new level. Oh, sweet Jesus, they have no idea. Are you gonna stay in school or are you gonna stay in the band? Dennis chose the band. In the morning, Danny calls Jack Holtzman from the Trans Love house. He says the Five are gonna be huge. He tells the truth, saying that they sold out the Grande twice over and had people lined up around the block to see them. He also lies through his teeth and says the Five were the most professional and ready-to-go band he'd ever seen. He also plugs the Stooges. Danny turns to John and goes, would you take 20 grand? That's a little under $168,000 in today's money. John just about passes out. 6 figures is game-changing for a little group like the White Panthers. He takes the 20 grand for the Five, and Jimmy Silver takes 5 grand for the Stooges. This group photo was taken to commemorate the occasion. We have the Five, their friends, and all their women, some Stooges, John Sinclair, oh my god, Rob's smiling for once. He's next to the MC of all of the Five's gigs, Brother JC. Jesse Crawford. As we can see from that group shot, film taken at the Grande, etc., etc., late 1968 was Wayne's turn to become hot. He outgrew those slightly elven features and just became devastatingly beautiful. You know, he was my original fave rave of the guys. Fave rave is old school groupie speak for your favorite guy in the band. I'm a guitarist girly through and through, and I was crazy about Wayne until my head was turned by that damn tooth gap. Anyway, a daring decision is made. The MC5's debut record would be recorded live. Why? Because, in case you couldn't already tell, these guys were what I like to call completely and entirely unmanageable. It would have taken an act of God to get 1968 MC5 into a studio. Not to mention they had very little experience in a studio environment. They had like 2 singles, One of the Guys and Looking at You, and that was basically it. They were very much a live group. They sounded best when they fed off the energy of the audience, and Elektra knew it. With 20 grand on the line, why set them up to fail? So a date was set to record. It would be on Zenta New Year. Russ Gibb paid off the fire marshal. The MC5, Elektra's engineers, and over 3,000 people descended on the Grande the night of October 30th, 1968. 55 years ago today, rock and roll history was made with... Haha, you thought I was gonna say it. This is Kick Out the Jams. Kick Out the Jams was the second ever episode of Vinyl Monday on YouTube, and now it's the second to receive the full Redux treatment. The reason I'm doing this now, number 1, today is the 55th anniversary of the recording of this album. Cause for celebration, if you ask me. Number 2, the original episode sucks. I am a much better writer now than I was then, and I had no idea how to be on camera, which caused problem number 3. Listen, it's legal in my state. It was my birthday weekend. I was so nervous to be on camera back then. Take 2, sober this time, let's go! So let's talk about this cover art. As is the case with a lot of these Elektra releases from the 60s and 70s, we have photos by Joel Brodsky and designed by Bill Harvey. The guys hated this cover. The audience's faces were all airbrushed out for fear of legal trouble, people suing for their likenesses, or rather the kids' parents suing for their likenesses. And Rob thought this was an unflattering shot, but joke's on him, joke's on all of them. This was the album cover that started it all for me. More on that later. Opening up the gatefold, we have a photo by Lenny Sinclair. But because my copy is a repress, an early repress from 1969, this is notably, unfortunately, a censored copy. Among other things, I do not have the liner notes that John Sinclair wrote, but here's a little bit of what they said. The MC5 is the revolution in all its applications. There is no separation. Everything is everything. There is no thing to fear. The music will make you strong, as it is strong, and there is no way it can be stopped now. All power to the people. The MC5 is here now for you to hear and see and feel now. Give it up, come together, get down, brothers and sisters, it's time to testify. And what you have here in your hands is a living testimonial to the absolute power and strength of these men. Go wild, the world is yours, take it now and be one with it. Kick out the jams. That last word, a 12-letter word you can't say on the radio, caused a big problem with sales. That word got a whole lot of copies pulled from the shelves or otherwise censored. I've heard of store clerks going through every single gatefold with a Sharpie just to cross out that word. So the music we hear on this album was recorded the night of October 30th, 1968 at the Grande. Brother JC delivers his iconic opening speech. There's video of this taken at soundcheck, I believe. Overall, this show was a disaster. Wayne's guitar slipped out of tune on the first song, Rob blew out his voice, no one could hear Dennis, and Dennis couldn't hear them, so there's these fluctuations in tempo, and whatever 16-track mobile unit Elektra brought out didn't pick up Wayne or Fred's mics. So they had to go into a studio, huddle around one mic, and howl and giggle into it like maniacs to get their backing vocals. I think Rob dubbed in more vocals too, I don't know. It definitely sounds like he did at some points. So in the weeks leading up to this show, the guys were told if they didn't like how this recording came out, they could do it again. This was a relief, seeing as, well, the show was a disaster and they wanted to do it all over. But there was no acetate made. That meant the records were pressed like immediately after the show, so it wouldn't have been possible to re-record. About the word. The Five didn't say it, or rather, Rob didn't shout it at the top of his lungs every night for the hell of it. It was a rallying cry to get people out of their seats, on their feet, and into gear, at the shows and on the streets. But there's a pretty obvious problem. You can't say the word on the record. There will be places that won't sell it. So the guys take a vote. Do we keep the word on the record to uphold the integrity of our message, or do we not say the word, sell more records, but maybe not make as much of a cultural impact? The vote goes 3-2. Dennis and Fred vote no. Wayne, Michael, and Rob vote yes. Of course Rob voted yes. I love the guy, but that yes vote was absolutely his frontman ego talking. This was his moment. The brothers and sisters replacement is still made for radio because duh. There were certain gigs where they couldn't say the word because the place was surrounded by who else? The police. Yeah, it was getting increasingly difficult for the Five to play a gig without getting beaten up, busted, or thrown in jail for obscenity and or profanity. There was one night where the guys peeked through the curtain and saw the place lined with police, so they run back to Rob in the dressing room and say, "Hey man, whatever you do, don't say the word." Got it. Not saying the word. Not saying the word. Not saying the word. After Wayne wraps up Ramblin' Rose, Rob runs up on stage and goes, "Kick out the jams!" and spits the clearest, most concise motherfucker he ever spat into the mic. The guys just look at each other. He looks at me, and I look at him. And he looks at me, and I look at him. He looks at me, and I look at him. F*** R. Kelly. And the set is over after not even 2 songs. I was also told by one of you viewers who went to one of their gigs in a park that the place got surrounded by state troopers. Rob runs out from wherever he was hiding, shouting, "Kick out the jams!" spots a sea of batons, and concludes with defeat in his eyes and his voice. Boys and girls. One of these gigs that went very sideways was the day after Christmas 1968 at the Fillmore East. So the motherfuckers were based out of the East Village where the Fillmore was. They wanted control of the place once a week for the community, whatever that was. So Jack Holtzman was like, "Hey, the MC5 are the people's band. We'll have them play a free show there." Danny Fields books a limo for the guys, totally not thinking about the implications. Having the people's band roll up in a limo, the motherfuckers were not pleased. The thing about Rob was that he had the spectacular ability to put his foot directly into his mouth. On this night, he did just that. He blundered spectacularly by saying, "We didn't come to New York for politics, we came for rock and roll." Cue the motherfuckers rioting. It is chaos. Equipment is trashed, knives are cutting down the curtain, records are being burned. Wayne and JC almost got fucking stabbed. Dennis grabs Short King Wayne by the back of the collar, and they haul ass out of there. In the chaos, Bill Graham himself got his nose broken, and he was convinced that Rob did it. The idea of poor Robin Tyner hitting anybody with anything is preposterous, but Bill didn't care. He blacklisted the Five from his venues and all venues affiliated with him. Another notoriously rough show was on January 10th, 1969. They played the Boston Tea Party with the Velvet Underground. Yes, this was the night that iconic guitar amp tape is from. My mind was blown when I put 2 and 2 together and figured out rock and roll history collided like this. Someone get Chris McGovern. They're gonna lose their mind over this. VU fucking hated the Five, probably because they wreaked havoc wherever they went. So Lou hopped on the mic and said something like, "We're not playing until everyone who came to see the MC5 gets the fuck out." Yeah, it's safe to say the Five's reputation preceded them before they even had an album out. The track listing of Kick Out the Jams goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Ramblin' Rose, followed by the title track, Kick Out the Jams. Then Come Together, and side 1 closes with Rocket Reducer. It has the subtitle Ramalama Fa Fa Fa. That's what I'll be calling this song for the rest of the video. Opening up side 2, we have Borderline, followed by Motor City is Burning. Then I Want You Right Now, and the album closes with Starship. Kick Out the Jams was released February of 1969 to total fucking chaos. In perhaps the most infamous review he ever wrote, his first for Rolling Stone, if I recall correctly, Lester Bangs trashed Kick Out the Jams. Here's some of the highlights. He starts off strong, calling it this sweaty aggregation. For my money, they come on more like Blue Cheer than Train and Saunders, but then my money has already gone for a copy of this ridiculous, overbearing, pretentious album. And maybe that's the idea, isn't it? Man, why did everyone hate Blue Cheer? He said JC's speech stood midway between Wild in the Streets and Arthur Brown. I don't know about you, but I would personally take being compared to one of the hardest hip-hop samples of all time as a compliment. The difference, which will sell several 100,000 copies of this album, is the hype. The thick overlay of Teenage Revolution and Total Energy Thing, which conceals these scrapyard vistas of cliches and ugly noise. And finally, they came on like a bunch of 16-year-old punks on a power trip. He said the thing! However, my favorite review of Kick Out the Jams came from the Columbus Dispatch that described it as sounding like a garbage can full of pliers going down a cement flight of steps. I cannot wait until I get to the point in my career where I can describe something like that. On February 26th, the MC5 encounters one Cynthia Plastercaster. Dennis and Wayne are numbers 10 and 11 respectively. Wayne's didn't cast somehow. I can't tell you exactly what happened because the Plastercaster documentary has been out of print for 16 years and I can't find it anywhere. But from the little bit I've seen from the trailer... From the little bit I've seen from the trailer, it looks like Wayne's mold hardened up before he could get it all the way in. So his cast is just the tip. Cynthia blushing and fanning herself in his presence is so real. Me too, girl. Rest in peace, Cynthia. R.I.P. to a fucking legend. Kick Out the Jams was the MC5's first and last release on Elektra. Wait, what? Cue my favorite saga in all of rock and roll history. Sometime in April of 1969, the Hudson's Incident. So the Five were already on thin fucking ice with Elektra. KOTJ MF obviously wasn't on the radio, but the existence of KOTJ MF and the liner notes got the album pulled from a lot of national ratings. And the guys were burning through the label's money like you wouldn't believe. Getting arrested for obscenity, profanity, disturbing the peace, whatever else, at least once a week. Equipment getting stolen or otherwise trashed. They racked up a big bill in a very short amount of time. Because of those liner notes, a department store chain called Hudson's refused to stock Kick Out the Jams on the grounds of profanity and obscenity. However, they were still selling The Doors' self-titled, and that album famously ends with a song about that. To call out this double standard, the MC5 take out a full-page advertisement in Fifth Estate that says this. Not only did they put Fifth Estate on blast in this ad, they put the Elektra logo on it. The Elektra logo was there because Elektra money was used to run the ad. However, Elektra had no idea the ad was running. Upon hearing about this ad, Hudson freaks out and stops selling all Elektra Records releases. That includes Judy Collins, Tim Buckley, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and yes, The Doors. This would be like if a chain like Tower Records, or for us New Englanders, Newbury Comics, stopped selling Elektra. This was huge. Elektra freaks out, takes this as their ticket to finally ditch these lunatics, and drops the MC5 like a hot potato. I happen to agree with Steve Harris's stance on the Hudson's incident. He said it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. On the one hand, the Hudson's incident was arguably the birth of the punk sensibility. But on the other hand, oh my god, you can't say "fuck you" in big letters and sign someone else's name on it. What did they think was gonna happen? So, what do I think of Kick Out the Jams? Going in, this explosive thing was my first exposure to the MC5. It's a lot of people's first exposures to this band. This was the first 5 record I owned via picking up this guy's entire record collection. I went in expecting to buy 150 records. I ended up walking away with over 300 for free, blah blah blah. It's Abigail DeVoe lore at this point. I spent a while away to, well, do my job and review other stuff on this channel. My first reaction to hearing Kick Out the Jams in full for the first time in months was, what the f*** was that? I mean, Jesus, if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, the intensity will wear you out. The energy is palpable. You can feel it from the stomping of the crowd, that one person in the audience at like every 60s live album recording who brings a tambourine in. The girls screaming. Starting off with Ramblin' Rose, singing the whole song in that goofy falsetto was the most Wayne choice he could have possibly made. I don't know what possessed him to do that, but whatever it was, I've grown to love it. If you pay attention, you can hear exactly when Wayne's low string slips out of tune, right there. I don't know if he bumped into something or what, but you can hear it as clear as day. Right out of the gate, you get this spectacular crunch of sound, this bone-crushing intensity. It's kind of incredible that the Five's greatest hit was written in what was essentially the kitchen of a frat house. Wayne lugged an amp in there, Rob had a lit joint in his hand, and they came up with the thesis statement of their whole careers, really. Kick Out the Jams is the tightest, most composed thing on this record, while still having all of that wild energy. I know we ooh and ah over how Fred and Wayne would lock together so easily as guitarists, They were made for each other. But listen to Michael's part here. It's nothing fancy, but it's the fluidity needed to balance out such a rock-solid slab of a song. Come Together. Again, what a treat it is to hear Mike play. It took another year or two for the rest of the guys to come into their own, I feel, but Mike had it on this album. Sadly, there is no MC5 album where all 5 of the guys would have it, and sadly, Mike would not always have it. This moment, the fire in Rob's belly, the grit, you get the feeling he sincerely believed everything he sang. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why there is a fade-out, fade-in separating Come Together and Ram-A-Llama. They were played back to back, they're on the same side of the record. Why not have one flow into the other? It's an odd, clunky choice. Ram-A-Llama Fa 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 is stupid fun. It's the kind of macho posturing that only a gaggle of perpetually stoned 20-year-olds could make remotely likable. Top to bottom, it's perfect, it's silly, it's sexy, I have nothing more to say. Borderline is utterly confounding. It's bruising and off-kilter the whole way through, never settles into anything. It's a song that the more I listen to it, the more I find myself liking it. This chord change especially, I really dig. For the life of me, I can't figure out what this song is about. I don't even know if Rob knew what it was about, and he wrote it. I know Kick Out the Jams is the MC5 song, and Starship, we'll get there, but the crown jewel of this album is Motor City's Burning. Everyone nailed it. Fred brings it back home with that bluesy thing, while Wayne is doing his signature disjointed, shrill, angular solos. It didn't always work, but it did here. Again, pay attention to what Mike is doing. There's no groundbreaking variations on the central theme, but the looseness helps things move along under the guitars. Jesus Christ, Rob. He is at home on this one. He was a blues man. He loved John Lee Hooker. The rawness of his voice from back when the 5 were gigging altogether too much really suits this song. Motor City's Burning only sounded better as time went on. Both 1972 recordings that I've heard were Dennis and Rob at the peak of their respective powers, but man, oh man, do I wish they did that last verse more often. And no, it's not just because I like hearing Rob say I may be a white boy, but I can be bad too, although that does get me twirling my hair and kicking my feet. In that vein, I will not be doing a deep dive on I Want You Right Now, because nothing I say will be articulate, concise, or allowed by the YouTube terms of service gods. But I will say this, I believe Elektra made them tone down this song to be on the record. If you think that this is a lot, I'm here to tell you this was the tamest I Want You Right Now ever put to tape. The song I've done a complete 180 on since last evaluating this record is Starship. Of all the music I've heard in my life, this is still some of the weirdest and heaviest shit I've ever heard. Made even crazier by the fact they were playing this in 1968. No one else was doing this. If Love's Forever Changes has no sense of gravity, then Starship destroys any and all laws of physics. That roaring takeoff launches us into this zero-gravity plane where stuff whizzes past our ears in the form of the guys moaning and whistling into the mics like goobers. Rob mixes his voice with feedback to create some exotic, mind-bending, harrowing shit. Dennis's roles here. He is a beast. This song's structure, or utter lack thereof, has taken us to a place where the sun shines eternally! I'm so sorry, I had to do that. That part specifically reminds me of the tunnel scene in Willy Wonka. I watched altogether way too many Gene Wilder films, way too young, and that is exactly why I am like that.
And they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing.
Gemini's guys stay winning. The guys slip into an off-kilter jazz thing for all of 15 seconds before the catastrophic crash back down to earth. I can't decide if this song is the best or the worst acid trip I've ever been on. It's straight up demented and I kinda love it. I wondered in the original Kick Out the Jams video why they didn't close the record with Black to Calm, and I honestly think I answered my own question. Black to Calm was a very mercurial song. It could be really, really good or really, really bad. As out there as it was, Starship was a more appropriate closer because it showed where the five were musically. Heavy into avant-garde jazz, Sun Ra, Pharoah Saunders, Albert Ayler. However, would I commit crimes to have a 1968 soundboard recording of Black to Calm? Oh hell yes! My one gripe with this album, unless you're really paying attention, it's easy to lose track of Dennis. Thing 1 and Thing 2 played so damn loud, it's hard for anyone to compete. But from what I can catch, Dennis is a spectacular engine firing on all cylinders. He slips in these little nuggets here and there, like an Elvin Jones thing buried in the chaos of Starship. Sure, this album is sloppy as hell, well and truly all over the place, but that was them. The MC5 were a kinetic thing, barely held together. These songs end in a blah because they collapse under the weight and inertia of themselves. I gotta say, I'm kinda glad the guys didn't get what they wanted. Otherwise, we might not have gotten this cultural landmark recording. It's a time capsule of the golden age of the grande, and for 40 minutes we get to be a fly on the wall. This is something that could never be replicated, even under perfect circumstances. Kick Out the Jams is lightning in a bottle. My personal favorites are Ramblin' Rose, the title track, Ramalama, Motor City is Burning, and Starship. And I think it's time to roll a transition, but not just any transition. This is something I've never gotten to say on Vinyl Monday before. Roll intermission. Holy shit, I'm standing up. Welcome to the first ever Vinyl Monday intermission! You guys never see this side of this room. I usually have, like, a good chunk of my closet lives here, but that rack is right there in front of where I usually film. I have a lot of stuff in a very little house, so I really have to maximize my space. So we've had a couple accidental intermissions by way of the mascot of this channel, my dog, I call him Buddy, just kind of walking in while I'm filming, but we've never had a proper intermission. Never quite something unhinged enough for Vinyl Monday. So while you grab a snack, drink some water, take a bathroom break, do whatever you cowards do to distract yourself from me finding rock stars hot, which is one of the pillars of my presence on the internet, might I add, I will be taking this time and the brand new Vinyl Monday intermission corkboard to make a tier list of Rob Tyner's Heras. Hair eras? Heras? Oh my god, wait, I just realized the boomers here aren't gonna know what a tier list is. Okay, I printed out all of these photos of Rob, or photos with Rob in them, and I'm gonna rank all of his hairstyles from my personal favorites to my least favorites. Don't let the colors fool you. F is the lowest rank, and this is the S tier. I put a star because I thought it was cute. S tier is the highest rank. Okay, Rob Tyner's hairstyles tier list. Let's go. Firstly, in our chronological order, the Beatle hair. For starters, I think this photo is adorable. Fred smiling? I can count on one hand the times I've seen Fred Smith smiling in a photo. It's precious, but this is not a photos of the MC5 tier list. This is a Rob Tyner's hair tier list. Something has to go on the bottom tier, right? The Beatle hair has always been my least favorite. Our faces are just too round for that. Something has to be in the F tier, so that is where I shall place the Beatle hair. Except for this photo. This is from the 66 breakout cover. I will be putting this at the D tier because the Beatle hair was inexplicably slightly better here. I don't know, it just looks a little less mushroomy. Early 67 Rob. This is a publicity shot from the opening of the Grandies. This would have been either like really late 66 or most likely early 67. I am going to put this at the B tier. You might be surprised, but hear me out. I realize that Rob Tyner is very much an acquired taste. I don't think anyone besides me, cause would call him conventionally attractive, but he's quite handsome here. The hair looks soft and fluffy. I like it. Okay, this is a really, really bad photo, but this is the 67 afro, or as I like to call it, the Black to Calm from Hell hair. I'm going to put this at the C tier. The curls are there, but it's not quite the glory we would reach in a few months with the 68 afro. A tier. This is A tier. It's got the same curl pattern, right? Uh-oh. I'm slowly realizing that maybe this board isn't quite big enough. We're gonna have to do some creative layering here. Same curl pattern as before, but a little more volume. I dig the facial hair situation. Yes, that is playing into my rankings. I've just decided it. Here is where things are gonna get really hard to rank. This photo right here, late 68 Rob. This is a photo by Lenny Sinclair. I keep this at my vanity, like tucked into my mirror. I keep a lot of stuff over there. Antique lace, the hair bows that I wore in the In Utero video, those are pinned to the lace. It is a maximalist Lana Del Rey vinyl coquette girlie's dream.
In the name of the Daddy, the Son, the Sonic, and the Machine Gun Holy Spirit. Amen. This is my perfume tray, by the way. Very proud of this.
Rob is the king of the fave raves, right? He gets a place of honor over the perfume tray, and he just looks so good here. The afro was in control, the sideburns were in control. S tier. The 69 afro. This is a screen grab from Lenny Sinclair's Kick Out the Jams vid. This is a really bad photo, but he was also rocking this hair on the Rolling Stone cover. This was the biggest, most insane his hair ever got. The bigger the better. However, when it overgrew, he looked a little bit too much like John Sinclair. I struggle to get behind these sideburns, however. This photo, S tier. S tier. Fucking S tier. The 69 afro overall is going to be B tier. The 1970 afro. This was the most chill his hair had been in a while, and it was flattering, especially here. Us round-faced bitches do have bone structure. It just only makes an appearance when the trajectory of the moon and the sun is just right. But I am going to put this at the B tier and hope my big ass head doesn't block it. Whenever the hell this was. It's different and I appreciate it for that. However, I am having trouble visualizing what it would look like from the front. So it's going in my C tier. The absurdity of all of this has only just caught up to me. Finally, the 72 afro. This is from their Beat Club performance in Germany. I know this is a bad screen grab. There are better photos out there, like this. I'm putting this in the A tier, and here's why. This performance, specifically this performance of Motor City's Burning, is what converted me to a Rob girly. It didn't just rewire my brain, it took the wires in both hands and crossed them. It made me a Rob girly. The Rob girly. I don't think there's another one of us, and I don't think I really want to share. Except with Becky. Becky gets first dibs, because duh. Overall, I think what we've learned here today is my type is Rob Tyner, which is awful unfortunate because they just don't make them like they used to. Curse modern orthodontics and the afro falling out of fashion for shrinking my dating pool down to about 0. And Rob gives me terrible hair guilt. Most of you won't know this, but this is not my natural hair. This is nowhere near my natural hair texture. My natural hair is a whole situation. It doesn't just grow this way, it also grows this way, and yes, a little bit that way. Not so much like this guy, more like this guy. As you can imagine, that hair was hell to grow up with. Starting at age 11 or 12, my mom would straighten my hair every night for me just so I could get a brush through it. I would totally straighten my hair, right? And then take a wand and re-curl the whole thing because my curl pattern wasn't correct. Only in the past 6 months or so have I started making friends with my natural hair texture again, and it's due in part to the guilt this guy's existence is giving me. Rob knew that his hair was beautiful just the way it was, and I have a feeling that he'd have a thing or two to say about me unzipping my curls every time I sit down in front of a camera. And I've made a point of saying this is not my natural hair texture because when you do what I do, when you spend so much of your time in front of a camera, the line between you and the character on people's screens, because this is a character, that line can get blurry. Keeping my natural hair texture largely a secret from the internet is a hard line between the character and me. Only my closest friends and family get to see me with that hair. You don't get to. All right, intermission's over. I'm going to stare at my beautiful board for a while. Back to you, kick out the jams, Abby. Thanks, intermission, Abby. I don't know about you, but I had to piss so bad. All right, so what did the 5 have in store for us after coming out swinging with Kick Out the Jams? Surely whatever it was, it must have been a real... Huh? This is back in the USA. Every 5 fan I've met in real life has been super chill. I bought my copy off another fan at a vintage fair in Rutland, Vermont. James, you are the coolest. Thank you for cutting me a deal on this, and I am a big dummy for not buying an uncensored Kick Out the Jams from you. This cover was photographed by Stephen Paley. I love this photo shoot. They're definitely backstage, but I'm not sure where. Everyone started off dry, but by the looks of it, at the end they were just soaked. I don't know if it's the sweat from playing or like dumping beer all over each other, but whatever it is, it must have been hell to wash out. If the Kick Out the Jams cover made me fall in love with the tooth gap, this made it even worse. Was there anything more glorious than Rob's hair in 1970? Well, actually, yes, there was. We just did a whole tier list about it. Okay, so to understand how we went from this to this, we have to go back a little to March of 1969, about a month before the Hudson's incident. The guys go on a tour of the West Coast, typical MC5 shenanigans ensue. Since their van got fucking firebombed a while back, still not over that by the way, they rented this Pontiac with their tour manager Steve, and y'all, this Pontiac was gross. The guys would get drunk and drive around aimlessly. Everyone puked out of the window at least once, and they didn't always make it out of the window. And it was never washed out. Wayne shares wine out of a jug with Timothy O'Leary, and wouldn't you know it, the jug is spiked with acid. He ends up at Tim's mother-in-law's place with Dennis. They have to drive home still tripping balls and crash the car into some guy's yard. So many of the best, most ridiculous pieces of MC5 lore can be filed under the subtitle, The Marvelous Misadventures of Dennis and Wayne. Emil Basila takes a photo of the guys with a groupie, or rather, inside the groupie. I can't show you the full photo for obvious reasons, but it was published in the Berkeley Bark. You can Google it. That got the guys in serious trouble with the wives and girlfriends back home, but you gotta admit, Fred was a legend for this. There's another incident that takes place in between the Fillmore East incident and the Hudson's incident. I like to call this one the San Francisco incident. A good chunk of the band is piled into this station wagon riding around with groupies. It's unclear exactly what happened, but Wayne says one of the girls flipped off a police officer and that got them all pulled over. Fred decides to employ the FAFO method. He F's around, getting Southern boy snarky with an officer, and he sure does find out. He gets the ever-loving kicked out of them. They all end up in jail for a week. Wayne swallows his whole hunk of hash and has an interesting first day. This chaotic trip was where sessions for the intended Kick Out the Jams follow-up began at Elektra's facilities in LA. That's where they recorded Teenage Lust, The Human Being Lawnmower, and Call Me Animal. The guys head back to Detroit, cue the Hudson's incident, but pretty soon after, Atlantic Records swoops in. They signed the Five for $50,000. That's about $419,000 in today's money. This was the most Atlantic had ever signed a group for. Let that sink in. Atlantic paid more for the MC5 than they did for Led Bloody Zeppelin. John Landau is on deck to produce the next album. Wayne bought a purple car. I Googled it. This thing was hideous. During all of this, John Sinclair gets arrested for possession again. Normally this would be NBD, like 6 months in jail, but it absolutely is a BFD right now because this was John's third strike. He's facing 10 years in federal prison. This puts the Five in a really tough position. Either we have no manager when he inevitably goes to jail and we are really screwed, or we part ways now, we're kinda screwed, and risk destroying the relationship with our biggest advocate and ally. They went with the latter. It wasn't pretty. The Five change hands from John Sinclair to D. Anthony. That didn't last very long, though. The Five were far too unruly for D. The guys offer a percentage of album sales to pay for John's defense. He refuses it. He is pissed that the Five have cut and run, but it wasn't like that at all. You can't manage the band if you're in jail! He's sentenced in July. Very complicated feelings, lots of resentment all around. John and the Five both feel that they put targets on each other's backs. In Detroit law enforcement's eyes, taking down the counterculture leader was the most effective way to undermine everything he was working towards. John was crucified not only for his own defiance, but for the MC5's too. He bashed the Five in the Village Voice, Rolling Stone, and Cream. In a particularly cutting remark, he said, "They wanted to be bigger than the Beatles. I wanted them to be bigger than Chairman Mao." The severity of his sentence sparked continued protesting through the rest of 1969 into 1970. Abby Hoffman infamously interrupted The Who's set at Woodstock, calling for John's release. Pete Townsend was not pleased about being interrupted and literally threw Abby off stage. The Supreme Court eventually overturned his sentencing, due in part to the Free John Sinclair rally and a little help from a Beatle. Extremely rare John Lennon dub. But back to the MC5. Sessions with Atlantic took place through the summer and fall of 1969. The album title was chosen for the Chuck Berry tune. He wrote that song after getting out of jail. I guess the Five appreciated that after so much legal trouble themselves. They recorded at GM Studio in Detroit, right next to an auto body shop. John Landau and Wayne Bond, as Wayne really tries to get Landau to be the Five's new manager. He knew better than that. John really tries to get the guys to think for themselves as musicians, start writing on their own, addressing their own individual faults. It's important to note that collectively, the Five's focus is leaning away from the jazz and avant-rock stuff and more towards the back-to-basics thing, which the rest of rock and roll will very soon pick up on. Through recording, 3 big problems come up. Number 1, these guys can't be consistent from take to save their lives. They cut their teeth playing live. Stuff sounded different every time they did it, and that hadn't been a problem before. That's just how they operated, but that doesn't work in a studio setting. You need consistency. Number 2, Mike stopped practicing. He'd fallen out of practice to the degree at which he's messing up simple chord changes. One day they do 30-something takes of Tutti Goddamn Fruity because Mike kept messing up the same thing. This was driving Dennis up the wall. John recommends bringing in a session player, but to keep it all in the family and maybe minimize some hurt feelings, Wayne steps in instead. He's playing the vast majority of bass on the record. In fact, Michael might not be on the record at all. Problem number 3. Tempo. The push and pull of Dennis's playing. Here's how he described it. I'm just paraphrasing it from a few interviews he's done. When everyone's on the same page, it gets intense. It's this physics-related thing, this principle that I don't know jack shit about because I was a STEM kid, but I wasn't that kind of STEM kid, okay? I was a chemistry kid. My high school chemistry teacher watches these, by the way. High pace. Whatever that physics thing is, you want to be ahead of the push. As a drummer, your natural inclination is to not be right on the beat, but be slightly ahead. Propulsion! That's what it's called! The thing is, the 5 was so intense all the time that it would be hard for anyone to rein that force in, especially Dennis, who wasn't fucking mic'd. The push-pull is apparent on Kick Out the Jams. You hear it in these surges of energy followed by a lull. Dennis was kind of hard-headed about this, which sparked this hilarious exchange between him and John. I'm not gonna play no fascist marching music. You can play free jazz if you want to, but you have to play it correctly. The only way to solve these problems is to record everyone's parts separately. You know, the exact opposite of how Kick Out the Jams was recorded. Oh my god, I completely forgot to mention this earlier. Okay, at some point around when The Human Being Lawnmower was written, Wayne gets called out to Fort Wayne Induction Center to do his mandatory draft physical. He gets out of Vietnam by, I shit you not, going on a 10-day meth binge. He is so out of his mind on said meth that he strips naked at the physical. I know I've already said this a few times already, but well and truly incredible. No notes. That is what people mean by boys will be boys. On New Year's Eve 1969, Fred and Sigrid marry. Rob acts as best man, and Wayne serves as maid of honor. Not man of honor, maid of honor. The very next day, on New Year's Day 1970, 3 days before the album's release, the 5 plays the Saginaw Civic Center. This is one of the best and most well-known MC5 bootlegs out there, partly because it was released on streaming service under the Are You Ready to Testify compilation. The set included quite a few songs that would be on the new record, Rob killing James Brown's It's a Man's World, and Perhaps the best Black to Calm the Five ever played. They keep it going for 7 minutes and it doesn't go to hell after the first 30 seconds. I'll take it. Most of the wacky improvisational stuff has been cut out, but 5 years after the song's inception, the guys have finally learned to effectively jam on the central motif. The track listing of Back in the USA goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Little Richard's Tutti Frutti, followed by Tonight. Then Teenage Lust. Next, Let Me Try, and side 1 closes with Looking at You. Opening up side 2, we have High School, followed by Call Me Animal. Then, The American Ruse. Next, Shaken Street. Then, The Human Being Lawnmower, and the album closes with the title track. Back in the USA was released on January 4th, 1970. This thing was viewed as uncool as possible. Chuck Berry in 1970 when the radio was playing country rock and prog? Yeah, this thing flopped hard in the US. Didn't even break the top 100, but it was a hit over in England. Why? Atlantic didn't have a promo office over here, but they did across the pond. They pushed the hell out of Back in the USA, got it into the hands of future members of bands like The Clash, cue the accidental birth of punk rock. The guys did this dreadful appearance on Lively Spot to promote the album. They played Looking at You and The American Ruse. Number 1, it is offensive that the network made the Five mime they're playing. You can tell they weren't used to doing that or being on such a tiny little stage. The whole thing is painfully awkward. And 2, I have no idea how they ever let The American Ruse be played on TV with that subject matter. Just weird choices all around that day. Hey, remember the bombing of the CIA building that happened like right after the Five moved to Ann Arbor for a year? I know it feels like a million years ago at this point, but Pun and Jack Forrest get charged for that. The guys play back-to-back gigs at Soldier Field and Tartar Field. They wore the same clothes both days in a row, so it's easy to mess up which photos were taken where. At Soldier Field, Wayne does this, Dennis does this, and Mike does this. That is a textbook interaction between a Taurus, a Virgo, and a Gemini. They play Tartar Field. Highlights include Dennis losing a drumstick not even 5 seconds into Ramblin' Rose, Rob changing his shirt halfway through the set because he sweat through the first one, and Wayne zooted beyond this mortal plane. So zooted that he's not even playing much on Looking at You, he's just doofing around. The very next day, the MC5 ship out to England for the very first time. They're set to play the Fun City Festival, their first gig in the UK. But in typical Five fashion, literally nothing goes to plan. Technical difficulties meant it couldn't be recorded for TV as intended, and apparently no one told the guys it was a free gig until the very end. Mick Farron had to break the news. It might have been a wash, but there were no hard feelings. Wayne and Mick actually become besties after this. And the Five have broken through in England. This was one of their major goals, and they'd finally done it. Oh, by the way, Mick was wearing a wizard hat that day. Just thought you should know. This is the dawn of the next and final stage of the MC5's career, the Europe years. And it's all because of the surprise success of this across the pond. So, what do I think of Back in the USA? Going in, this is a complete 180 from Kick Out the Jams. It's like a totally different band. Everything's more composed. You even get that from the album art. Simple black and white portraits. There have been times when Back in the USA was my favorite Five album. There's a lot to love about it. For one, this is a lot more accessible than Kick Out the Jams. The guys are friends with the traditional song structure again. I wouldn't say this is pop, by any means, but it certainly has a lot more mainstream appeal and listenability than fucking Starship. Rob's vocal evolution in just under a year from when Kick Out the Jams was recorded to this is astounding. You can tell on some of those earlier recordings he's still trying to get a grasp on what his sound is. You know, he's still figuring out the whole singing thing. A lot of his gruffness has subsided, but none of the power is lost. Looking at You was one of the songs that made me fall in love with the Five. It was the Tartar Field performance, actually, where Wayne is so blasted on God knows what that he does this. Not to be a girl or anything, but it takes a beautiful man to make that look charming and not goofy as hell. When I first saw this, I screamed like a girl at a Beatles concert. What is better than that? To see the chemistry these guys had and the command they had over the stage was magic. I've heard somewhere that Wayne played this solo a little different every time between the recording from '68, this, the live stuff. That tracks. On the album version, we get a taste of what I like to call his comfort lick. Every guitarist has one, something familiar they go back to and work into as many solos as they can. This was Wayne's. Looking at You is tight on the record. Tight for the good. Like Looking at You, the American Ruse feels very MC5, even with this very different approach to recording. Fred also gets a solo on this one. The incorporation of is cheeky. I want you to pay attention to these lyrics. And when they pull you over, it's suspicious. For something that just ain't your fault. If you complain, they're gonna get vicious, kick in your teeth and charge you with assault. If I had to guess, this part is about Fred getting beat up in the San Francisco incident, but I just want you to sit with those lyrics and be ashamed of how our country really hasn't made much progress at all on the front of police brutality in the 53 years since this song was released. Hell, 54 since it was written. Putting this, the Human Being Lawnmower, and the title track all together in the sequencing was genius. It adds a layer of sarcasm to that Chuck Berry tune. There are some oddly joyous moments on Back in the USA. High School is so much fun. I know Tonight was supposed to be the tune to get you out of your seat and dancing, but High School really does it. We have Fred's lead vocal debut, and I think his writing debut as well, on Shakin' Street, a little shuffle with some acoustic guitars layered in. So my biggest hang-ups with Back in the USA. Number one, it's scrubbed a little too clean. This really messed with songs like Call Me Animal and Human Being Lawnmower, the primal drive Animal should have, and the chaos Lawnmower should have had. They got trampled all over by the too clean production. Human Being Lawnmower especially, I feel, would have benefited with a kick out the jamsy, sloppier approach. Back in the USA was recorded a la carte. Everyone recorded their parts separately. That was not how the Five worked. That was just not their strong suit. This strategy overcorrected the perceived sloppiness of Kick Out the Jams. Hi, Part 1 Abby here, remember me? Not exactly sure where in the video this note will fall, but right now, at the 110-minute mark, this video is officially longer than the MC5's entire discography. Just think about that. Number two, I do not like this production. It stuck a lot of people's weaknesses in the spotlight. I especially hate how John Mike Dennis's drums, it's way too tight on the snare. You lose all the dynamics of his playing, and it really does get to sounding like fascist marching music. Dennis is the driving force of the MC5. Let the man drive. Wayne's guitar was shrill enough. The mix needed to favor the body in the rest of the instruments and the lower end of Wayne's tone. This mix did the exact opposite. I know John meant well, trying to give the guys a super fresh sounding record, and I guess Yes, it is a nice change of pace after the terrible quality of all those bootlegs, but again, this creative choice just did not play to the guy's strengths. And number 3, there are just points on this record that feel awkward. I don't mind closing things out with a Chuck Berry tune. It pays respect to a huge influence on the 5. But opening the record with a cover of Tutti Frutti, of all Little Richard songs you could have possibly picked, is confounding. Like, I'm not gonna skip it, but it is objectively a whack choice. Tonight's a good song otherwise. Why did we have to open it like this? Like, be more obvious that this record was a bid to secure a teen audience, I dare you. And the very overt self-reference on Teenage Lust wrecks a song that could have almost worked otherwise. Like, instrumentally, it's fantastic. Everyone's playing great. But the lyrics. No song on here is exactly a paradigm of writing. The 5 were not known for their writing prowess. No Dylans, Lennons, or McCartneys here. I don't know what to make of Let Me Try. On the one hand, this is not a ballads band. I don't listen to these guys to hear a ballad. But on the other hand, I am a Rob girly, and I appreciate being fed. This is the weakest album of the bunch. It's not representative at all of what made this band special, but just like Kick Out the Jams, in some weird roundabout way, back in the USA, was also ahead of its time. These bratty, snappy 2 or 3 minute songs may have been thoroughly out of fashion by early 1970, but those will be back in a big way with the dawn of punk rock in about 5 years, and we're still about 10 years out from that 1950s rock and roll revival. As flawed as this is still a lot of fun. This is my I'm getting ready in the morning and I want to sing and dance and be surprised that I still know every word after months away MC5 record. That's why it was my favorite once upon a time. Even the pitfalls can't affect its energy. The best songs here are so good that even the drawbacks of production couldn't shake them. You can stick it on, replay it a time or 3, and not feel like you're breaking your brain. Back in the USA is without that spectacular roar, but it's not without the bite. My personal favorites are tentatively Tonight and definitely Looking at You, High School, and The American Ruse. Alright guys, flush your hash and find your passports. We are following the MC5 to Europe. How are we gonna come back from this? This is High Time. You guys, I have a story about obtaining this record. When possible, I shout out the stores that I buy my records from. Independent record stores are the backbone of vinyl collecting. They're so important for collectors like me and really important to new collectors. If I didn't have some great stores around me with some great bargain bins, I might not have ever gotten into the hobby the way I did. Most of the time, as a minority of the vinyl community, in case you haven't noticed, I'm a 24-year-old woman. I can count on one hand the times I have not been the only woman in the record store. Most of the time, I am treated really well by independent record stores. I've met some wonderful sales clerks. I've met amazing people at, like, vintage fairs. The guy at the Rutland Vintage Fair, James, who sold me my copy of Back in the USA, he's amazing. I've met so many people like that. I will not be saying the store where I got my copy of High Time, because on that day, from that store clerk, I was reminded that I am on the outside looking in on the vinyl community. I wish I could take you back to that moment to show you how I felt like I had to prove myself while I was at the store. I know that probably wasn't articulate, but For those of you asking, you know, why aren't young people into this kind of stuff? Well, maybe it's because of you. Anyway, back to the music, because I am genuinely so excited to be talking about High Time. This is a well and good cover, but the gatefold. The gatefold of this album, which B-Roll Abby will be showing you, is something to behold. On the left, we have this shot by Stephen Fairchild, not sure which gig this is from, but the right side. There is a lot to unpack here. I am not kidding when I say these group shots at the bottom are one of my favorite things the MC5 ever did. For example, I didn't know that I needed to see Wayne Kramer in a dress until I saw Wayne Kramer in a dress, and now that need is fulfilled. Thank you, Wayne. Very cool. Each of the guys have a portrait representing them and their personalities. Wayne's gone full werewolf. Rob's drawing at a desk with the caveman mallet on there too. Caveman Rob, another thing that I didn't know I needed to see until I saw it. Each of the guys wrote their own little blurbs to be included with their portrait, but Mike and Dennis's got swapped. If anyone's got a newer press of this, please let me know if that was corrected. Oh, I forgot to mention, my copy is an original. We've got credits, we've got thank yous, we've got more special guests on this thing than you could shake a tambourine at, and oh my god, that's Betty Kahn's name! Do you remember her? Rob discovered feedback at Betty Kahn's house. 1971 is the time where any and all reliable narration of this story ends. Mike and Dennis have already begun using heroin, and during High Time production, Wayne starts too. There was also a mutiny in which Wayne was booted as band leader in favor of Fred. This is also the time Fred starts wearing this f***ass hat. My god, it's almost as heinous as Wayne's crochet shirt. Not this one on the Black to Come compilation cover. That one was lovely. This one. Who let him out of the house like that? No one was happy with how Back in the USA turned out, so the Five are hell-bent on producing for themselves. However, the MC5 had no fucking clue how to produce for themselves. This is where we meet the man who both Wayne and Dennis have said almost saved the MC5. Producer Jeffrey Haslam. A byproduct of John Landau's influence on Back in the USA was the individualization of the members of the MC5? Is that even the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I'm on my 4th costume change and I don't have any brain cells left. Fred really steps up to the plate songwriting-wise. He brings in the first song written expressly for High Time, this batshit crazy 7-minute tune called Sister Anne. It has distinct movements, dueling guitar solos, even the Salvation Army band. There's another song the Five have been kicking around for a while, since at least 1970, called Power Trip. High Time was a first for the Five. We have 4 individually credited songwriters on this album. Before this, all of the songs had just been credited to all of the guys. For example, Kick Out the Jams, co-written by Rob and Wayne, but credited to the whole band. High Time was recorded by Artie Field's production at the Alhambra Theatre in Detroit and Landzone and Pi Studios in London. The Five welcomed splitting home base between Detroit and London. They'd essentially been run out of the States for being too political for the music industry, but not political enough for the counterculture. They'd work all afternoon and night, going home to crash in the morning. Charles Moore contributes a brass section to the song formerly known as Power Trip, newly christened as Skunk. I get the sense that the studio was a revolving door during production. We have just so many people on this thing. I'm gonna read these names from my notes so that I don't miss the few I will be reading out. Charles Moore plays the trumpet with Rick Ferretti. We have Leon Henderson on alto sax and Dan Bullock on trombone. are guest vocalists on Sister Anne, credited as Freedom Now. That consists of Brenda Knight, Joanne Hill, and Merlene Driscoll, and we even have Rob's son dropping in on Future Now. Jeffrey kind of poo-pooed the brass section that the guys put together. He whispered in Wayne's ear, you know, we can bring in some of our session guys to do this. But Wayne said no. Remember, these are jazz heads. They liked the dissonant stuff. Artie has 16-track recording technology. This was a game changer. This allowed the Five to do all the crazy stuff they wanted to do with this record. This also meant that if Mike flubbed a chord change, the rest of the guys could just complete a take, and Mike could go back in and overdub the mistake. Or punch in, as it was called. Some famous faces dropped by sessions on both sides of the pond. In England, Chris Squire of Yes loaned Mike his bass, and back in Detroit, the guys invited Bob Seger and Scott Morgan for the drum intro on Skunk. They're credited on My Jacket, but Wayne said that Bob, Scott, and company had no idea what the hell they were supposed to be doing. So they were sent home, and the Five do the whole intro by themselves. Dennis did his drum track in just one take. I feel like we haven't had any frontman antics in a while. Over in the vocal booth, Rob's getting a little fussy. Over and Over was written in the key of A, at that spot in Rob's range between his chest voice and his falsetto. This is not a comfortable spot to be in. In taking all of that effort just to hit the damn notes, he'd lost all the passion in his voice. He just wasn't getting the delivery. Fred and Wayne kept stopping him in the booth like, dude, you gotta dig deeper on this. They're egging him on. They take each other line by line through this song, okay? What does this mean? What does this mean? How does that make you feel? Well, it means this. Well, that's just one line. How about this one? Rob was getting pissed off, so he's sent on a break to cool down. Have some water, have a cup of tea, maybe a little honey, maybe a little lemon. What I would give to have his birth time. I just feel like his birth chart would make so much sense. Rob hops back into the booth and kills it. But upon hearing the playback, Rob laughed at himself, saying he sounded like Rough Trade from Venus. This quip would become somewhat of a tagline for the rest of the Five's history. The track listing of High Time goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Sister Anne, followed by Baby Won'tcha. Then Miss X, and side 1 closes with Gotta Keep Movin'. Opening up side 2, we have Future Now, followed by Poison. Then Over and Over, and the album closes with Skunk, with the subtitle Sonically Speaking. High Time was released in July of 1971 to nothing. High Time was promoted even less than Back in the USA was in both the US and UK. There was just so much stuff going on in 1971 that no one remembered the Five. However, those who heard High Time dug it. Lenny Kaye for Rolling Stone said, "The old saw is that you can't keep a good band down, and it's never been more forcefully put than here." He described High Time as the first record that came close to telling the tale of their legacy, reputation, and attendant charisma. They were being called legends all of 2 years after their debut album. Lenny praises Sister Anne and Baby Won'tcha in particular, highlighting their 3-chord wonders and Rob's performance on the record as a highlight. He names Dennis's Gotta Keep Movin' as the strongest cut overall. But Lenny wasn't really about the wackier stuff happening on here. He felt the spacey section tacked on to the end of Future Now was the worst offender. He also wasn't really crazy about the horn section on Skunk, but overall, flaws aside, it's pretty damn good. For this, we can only praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Damn it! I am mad I didn't come up with that line! I already know I couldn't come up with a line that could stand up to that in my review, but let's just go ahead with this anyway. What do I think of High Time? I I recognize I jumped the gun expressing my excitement to be talking about this record. What a quantum leap forward High Time is from back in the USA. John Landau, he meant well, but he just didn't know how to record the 5. Jeffrey Haslam did. He hit it out of the fucking park. What sets High Time apart from the albums that came before is the incorporation of more instruments, more layers of everything from that 16-track machine. Wayne always wanted keys in the 5. We got a taste of that on Back in the USA, but now we have organ and tambourine, those little fucking finger cymbals. I don't know what they're called. A full brass section, the Salvation Army Band. They finally let Rob play his stupid sexy harmonica on a record. All of this shows how much more comfortable the 5 are as musicians and in the studio. High Time comes out swinging with Sister Ann, opening your record with a 7-minute song. What a way to do it. I talked about this song in the Losing My Opinion podcast back in March. That feels like a lifetime ago. Oh my god, that was before the Blind Faith video. And if I recall correctly, it was Thin Lear who was surprised by Sister Ann. He said something like, I didn't know the MC5 were capable of composed stuff like this. That's why I love playing Sister Ann for people who only know the 5 from Kick Out the Jams. This song is the perfect blend of everything they had in their arsenal by 1971. The raw passion of Kick Out the Jams and the studio chops from Back in the USA. And we have the new asset of Fred coming into his own as a writer. Sister Ann is exciting. The twists and turns are all a surprise. We have gospel, we have overdubbing on overdubbing on overdubbing. This is intricacy and depth we are not used to hearing from this band. Baby Won'tcha is so much fun. Fred was, I feel, the best lyricist of the bunch, and High Time has the best lyrics of all the albums. Baby Won'tcha is the cream of the crop lyrically. My god, there are a lot of words to spit out. This song feels like a rectifications of the mistakes made on Back in the USA. We have all the same components: drum, bass, guitar, keys, vocals, right? But this song was written for dynamics. The mix brightens the color that's already there. The backing vocals don't feel so flat. The guitars pop in and out through the solos. Baby Won'tcha is three-dimensional and comfortable being so. Miss X is the worst MC5 song. I skip this one every time it comes on. I'm not even sorry. I applaud the experimentation, you know, trying out a ballad, but experimentation comes with varying degrees of success. Sorry, Wayne. Next! Closing out side 1 is Gotta Keep Movin', the Dennis penned tune. This song is a precursor to the writing he'll do for his bands after the 5. No, not that New Order, the New Order. Gonna point out a lyric here. They ridicule my wild ambitions, say settle down, son, live decently, or you'll rot in jail before you're 23. I just wanted to remind you how young all of these guys were. During the height of the White Panthers Kick Out the Jams nonsense, the guys were 20, 21 years old. Rob was the oldest of the bunch and he just turned 24. Atom bomb, Vietnam, missiles on the moon, and they wonder why their kids are shooting drugs so soon. These guys have seen a lot in a very short amount of time, very young, and it affected them. As a whole, the lyrics have a flow. They don't stumble over each other. The other guys can get a little word salady. Dennis didn't. As far as instrumentation goes, for a song written by a drummer, I was hoping for a little more texture in the percussion. There's a moment right here, though. Opening up side 2, Future Now. Sorry, I just gotta... I've been fed. I didn't know I was starving until I was fed. This right here. This was the best Rob's voice ever was. Rob's voice was the 5th instrument of the MC5, a fine and beautiful instrument. Future Now has Rob written all over it. He wrote lyrics that were embarrassingly earnest and quite in your face. Screaming useless martyrs hanging naked upon a cross, that is one hell of a way to start a song. And the dramatic spacey end, yeah, that was all him. Even though Wayne had a total dud with Miss X, he had a winner with Poison. Of course he wrote some more goofy falsetto into this song. Of course. We've got a fantastic co-lead vocal from Rob and Michael. I thought that was Wayne on that second part, but no, the vocals are credited to Rob and Mike. Man, I had no idea he had it in him. These two were electric together. But it's worth noting they're throwing sparks on lyrics like, "But I ripped my pants, doing some dance that I learned in France." Oh my god, I know what this lyric is in reference to. Okay, so back in the Grande days, right, when the guys were still wearing all that sparkly shit, Wayne wore his stage pants so tight that the only logical explanation was that the girls would have had to sew him into them. And somehow, in his perpetual stonedness, he got it in his head that revolutionaries don't wear underwear. Well, one night, he was doing his little moves. He busts a move a little too hard. He ripped his pants. He caught an indecent exposure charge. Right, so now we can add Wayne Kramer to my list of rock and roll men who've had their whole dicks out on stage. So that would be Wayne Kramer, Jim Morrison, and Damon Albarn. If you know of any more, please let me know. I will be poring over this guitar part for a while. This was so unique within the Five's discography. For the love of God, Fred, did you have to write over and over in the key of A? Like, I know it sounds great on guitar, but you're killing Rob. Nonetheless, Rob killed it. He persevered. He funneled his frustration into the performance and nailed it. It almost sounds like he's crying at times. He really did nail that vocal take. And finally, Skunk. I love how textured those drums are. I love how adventurous the Five got with their instrumentation and their arrangement, and I love how Jeffrey encouraged that. Fuck it. Dennis is the most underrated guy in the group. Now that production is finally treating his instrument right, we get to appreciate his talent. He finally got to do his Keith Moon meets Jazzmaster thing. He's unstoppable. The brass is dissonant but triumphant. This song feels like a victory lap after everyone was pushed to their limits on this record. But for the life of me, I can't figure out why Sister Anne is the opener and Skunk is the closer. I would have swapped them. Maybe this is just my bias knowing this was the last album, but Sister Anne feels more like a grand finale. I respect the great Lenny Kaye, but I gotta disagree with him. I think the risks the guys took with song structure on stuff like Sister Anne, Future Now, Skunk, I think those risks yielded some of the highest rewards. That willingness to stretch a song was one of their assets during the Kick Out the Jams era. They abandoned it through Back in the USA. I feel it was to their detriment. It was smart to revisit for High Time. It may not always land, but when it does, it's such a thrill. High Time wasn't meant to be a statement of finality at all. The guys thought they were gonna cut at least one more, and they were looking forward to it. This was a celebration of how far they'd come. It's a rich, intricate, mature display of mastery. We had our stars on Kick Out the Jams, but finally, with High Time, the rest of the guys hit their stride. The balance was struck between power and technicality. Their aha moment had finally been realized, and it was magic. It's a shame this flopped so hard, because this is the best MC5 record. I'll go as far as to say High Time is the criminally underrated rock and roll album of 1971. I cannot wait until this experiences a greater renaissance because in my heart, I know it will. My personal favorites are Sister Anne, Baby Won'tcha, Future Now, Poison, and Skunk. It's 1972, and the MC5 is coming apart at the seams. The Five are turning up late and/or trash to so many gigs that promoters won't book them anymore. Enter their final manager, pirate radio legend Ronan O'Rahilly. He secures one of the Five's last big gigs, writing a song for his film Gold. The film was shit, but the guys didn't care, they liked the challenge. This was the spark that led to Wayne composing film scores later in his life. Mike had been on the outs with the other guys for a while now. The final straw was when he missed a flight to Heathrow. He's making more money dealing heroin than he is being in the Five at this point. Fred and Wayne issue an ultimatum, either get your shit together or you're out. Which is rich because neither Fred nor Wayne have their shit together either. Fred's careening towards full-blown alcoholism at this point, and Wayne's a junkie. So, Michael's fired. The question of a permanent bassist had to be addressed. Wayne wanted Charlie Solomon, a really talented guy. Dennis played really, really well with him. For some reason, Fred vetoed having Charlie in the band, and this really rubbed Wayne the wrong way. Enter the Five's final bassist, Derek Hughes. He played with them for a really great couple late-stage MC5 TV gigs, the Beat Club in Germany, and Rockenstock in France. Highlights of Rockenstock include a fiery kick-out the jams into Empty Heart, even though Rob forgets the lyrics of the song he's been singing every night for the past 4 years, then botches his harmonica solo so hard he gives up. Screw-ups aside, everyone is playing great. This is some of the best drumming Dennis has ever done, and these little yelps are one of my favorite things Rob did because it was so unique to him, you know? That takes so much vocal control to do. I'm left in awe. You can hear this whole set on the Thunder Express compilation. On Beat Club, they did 2 takes of Kick Out the Jams, 1 of Ramblin' Rose, Tonight, Motor City's Burnin', and our final iteration of Black to Calm. This is the tightest, least improvisational the song has been in a long time.
Let your love come down in the midnight hour. Let it come on down, down, down.
The Wembley Stadium incident. This could have been huge for the Five. They were on the bill with Bill Haley, Bo Diddley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and goddamn Screamin' Lord Sutch, who made one of the best worst records I've ever heard. For some reason that I can't wrap my head around, the guys decide to dress like freaks. I'm talking like gold face paint, glitter in the hair. It's like proto-glam rock? Oh dear god, the Sonic suit! I almost forgot about the Sonic suit. Alright, so sometime in 1971, Fred dreamed up this character, Sonic Smith. He was supposed to be some intergalactic superhero, I think? I don't fucking know, man. Whatever he was supposed to be, Sigrid made this character a shiny silver super suit.
Where is my super suit?
Alright, so everyone looks insane in front of this audience of thousands of teddy boys. Old school rock and rollers, so they think the Five are whack to begin with. Someone threw a beer can on stage, and once again, Rob puts his foot directly in his mouth. He picks up this beer can and throws it back. Cue the guys being pelted by a hurricane of cans and God knows what else until they're run off stage. Atlantic comes to the same realization Elektra did 3 years ago, that the MC5 is just way more trouble than they're worth. After the Wembley incident, they're dropped from Atlantic, their second and final label. But Ronan's like, ah hell, we can do this on our own until we just get another offer. The Five have one last tour booked through the fall of '72. In Scandinavia, it would last for 6 weeks. Rob had been wanting to leave the band for years at this point. There was no money in it anymore. He loved the music first and foremost, more than anything. He wasn't in it for the money. But at the end of the day, he had a wife and kids to take care of. In the beginning, we'd hold these marathon fish bowling sessions with him, where he would attempt to convince us why he should leave, and we would quadruple team him to stay. After the second go-around of this, I said I wouldn't do it anymore. These brainwashing sessions were ugly. We would just tear him apart. True, I've been critical of him over the years for not living up to my impossible standards of what a lead singer should be, but Rob was a mercurial artist. Sometimes he would follow his feelings on stage and do or say the exact wrong thing, and I would jump on him for it. He was a tremendously talented man in an untenable situation, and he wanted out. In November of '72, Rob quits the band for good. Fred goes over to his house and tries to convince him to just please go on this last tour, but Rob flips his shit. Words are hurled. It devolves into a fistfight. A full circle moment in the worst way. Upon hearing news that Rob quit, Dennis jumped ship too. The Scandinavian tour is a disaster. There's cancellations left and right. Richie Dharma sits in on drums, but he has no clue what he's doing, and Wayne had never attempted to sing these songs before. After the Scandinavian tour concludes, the Five are invited to play a gig at the Grande on New Year's Eve 1972. It'd be bittersweet to see all those familiar faces, a homecoming of sorts after rambling around Europe for the past year and a half. They even got Mike and Rob to come back. But where the Five packed the place wall to wall once upon a time, where they sold 4,000 tickets for a 1,500 capacity venue, no one came to New Year's Eve. The tempos were all over the map. I had no idea what Michael was playing. Rob was doing the best he could to front all this mess, and Fred and I just looked at each other in dismay. Frustrated, embarrassed, and pissed off, Wayne storms off stage halfway through the set, abandoning ship to go get high. The mighty MC5 ended not with the bang they deserved, but with a whimper. While New Year's Eve 1972 was the end of the MC5, it wasn't the end of their story. For all 51 years after that last gig, the Five's history has kept marching on. Various reunion lineups have formed over that time. Rob formed the first in the mid-70s. This is one of those gig posters. I actually saw this on Dennis's blog. He had a photo of this poster on his blog, and I was like, oh my god, I have that in my house. It seems Rob immediately regretted leaving the band and reformed it when Wayne went to prison. Oh, Wayne and Michael went to federal prison for 2 years, by the way. Kind of a big deal. DKT MC5 with Wayne, Mike, and Dennis had their run in the 2000s. My favorite iteration of Wayne's MC5 was MC50 with Marcus Durant of Zen Gorilla. Oh my god, I saw that lineup on KEXP and I was enamored by Marcus. I was so in awe of him that I swallowed my gum. But as good as those lineups were, it was never the same. Of course it was never the same. You know the saying, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. The MC5 was exactly the sum of its parts. That's why the foundation cracked when Mike was fired and why they were entirely destabilized when Rob left. They were all the gravitational force holding everything together. You take one piece out and the circle isn't complete. This band was too brilliant and too beautiful to last. All of the coolest, rawest, sexiest, most powerful, most dangerous, most beautiful things just burn too fast to last. That's why the MC5, as we know them in this video, a rare brotherhood that no one would totally understand unless they were in it themselves, would never reunite in full. Dennis said, "Fuck, I'm so bad at math," in 96? I think that years and years from now, probably about 27 of them, I believe we'll be legendary not so much for politics, but for what we stood for. And son of a bitch, he was right. For a band that was all about the right now, the Five have played the long game with their legacy. So many bands, from Zen Gorilla to Rage Against the Machine, Wayne and Tom Morello are like besties now, to Motorhead, to the fucking Clash. All of them can trace their sound back to the MC5. People love this band, especially musicians and critics too. Even Lester Bangs went back on his review of Kick Out the Jams. Dennis said that all the Five wanted to do was play rock and roll and be better than the Rolling Stones, and for one brief, glimmering moment in time, they were. That peak, that zenith, was how I discovered the MC5. There was life before Kick Out the Jams, and there is life after Kick Out the Jams. I will never forget putting this on my turntable for the first time, and that suffocating July heat made even worse by the fact that I can't run my turntable and my AC at the same time, or else I will trip the breaker. I filled the room with this ungodly roar, unlike anything I'd ever heard. I'd never been fully satisfied with punk, and on that day, I heard a record of what I wished all punk would be. And on this record was this spectacular force of a man, this soft-spoken guy otherwise, but he turned into a beast as soon as you put the mic in his hand. Rob has been the king of my fave-raves ever since I opened this gatefold. Ask me who the greatest frontman of the 1960s was. I'm not gonna say Mick, or Planty, or Morrison. I will say Robin Tyner every single time. Back in the Five's Europe years, this might have been their first time in Germany. The guys ended up in a bar in a drinking contest with some Germans. Fred told the story back in '92. It became a singing contest. Germans love their drinking songs. Rob got up on the table and sang the most beautiful rendition of Georgia on My Mind. It blew everyone in the bar away. Fred thought the guys won the drinking contest too, but he couldn't remember. Gee, I wonder why. And Dennis lived with Rob for a while. When Dennis was on heroin, he'd go cold turkey every time they toured in Europe. Through all those cold turkeys, Rob took care of me. I was climbing the walls, he used to give me rub downs and watch over me. I really miss him. Rob Tyner was a great person. I really miss him. I have been dreading this part in particular because I wanted to keep Rob alive in this story as long as I could. But the MC5 only ever reunited because of Rob's death. In 1991, at 46 years old. He died just as he was kicking his music career back into gear. Oh shoot. Hold on. I have one of these bad boys, and I realize I'm very, very lucky to have one of them. These are impossible to find. Rob released his one and only solo album the year before, Blood Brothers. These bad boys are very hard to find. I am extremely lucky to own one. According to one of the last interviews Rob gave, if not the last, which you can hear on this album, a second record was in the works, but those demos, if they even exist, have never seen the light of day. When I stumbled across that clip of Dennis visiting the Grande in '96, I was making this shirt. He told the story of Rob taking care of him, and I cried like a baby. I got on the phone with my best friend, and I sobbed. I wasn't expecting all of that from Dennis. I thought I was just hearing about the Grande, and it became this other, very special, vulnerable thing. On the anniversary of Rob's death last year, I went to a thrift store, and I saw an auto harp. He used to play the auto harp. I didn't buy it. I kicked myself ever since because I thought I'd never find one for myself again. Until a few weeks ago when I went to a vintage fair and I saw this. And now it's mine. And now I'm gonna learn to play it. For so long, I wondered what I was put on this earth to do, what I was made for, because I've never felt at peace. I'm a freak with very big hair and glasses and strange ideas about the world. But then I saw Rob and I realized my purpose. I was made to keep the legacy of rock and roll alive. I was made to tend to the hearth of the gods. Robin Tyner guided me to my life's purpose. And now I'm here, making this video, telling the story of the most rock and roll band there ever was. They were the American equivalent of The Who, the Rolling Stones from hell. The purpose of this was not to insert myself as a footnote of the Five's legacy. Would it be hilarious if some white chick from New England managed to do that? Yes. Was that my intention? No. I just want to tell this story to whoever will listen, because this story is too human not to be told. In the end, if I could show you even a fraction of the joy these 5 fucking freaks from Detroit have given me, then this video has served its purpose. They were barely held together at the seams, but when they worked, my God, they really worked. They worked like no one has before or since. They were the Prometheus of rock and roll. They stole the fire of the rock and roll gods and brought it to us. Praise God and pass the ammunition. Long live the mighty Motor City 5. As I wrap this monster of a video up, I want to thank all of the cool people I've met through being an MC5 fan on the internet. The original Kick Out the Jams video is like a 1.5 years old, and I still get people sharing their stories with me. To those who were lucky enough to experience the 5 in the flesh, thank you for enlightening the rest of us. I love this bizarro brotherhood we have. Thank you to my best friend Jackie, who has listened to me bitch and moan and cry about this project for the past 10 months. You were the only other person on the planet who knew about this thing. Thank you for keeping my secret. And thank you for letting me convert you into a Wayne fan. I switched to a Rob girly, so I had to convert someone else to Team Wayne in my place. Thank you, Dan, the patron saint of this channel, you know, the one who gave me his record collection all those years ago. I wanted to share this with you viewers, but I actually can't find the note. I'm kind of a sentimental pack rat who saves everything, and in all of my everything, I can't find this, but a while back, after the Layla video, Dan gave me the last 3 records he was hanging onto from his collection, with a note. And on the envelope of that note, I remember clear as day, he wrote this: "I can't believe you found MC5. Of course I found the MC5, because you went out and bought Kick Out the Jams as a teenager. That's right, remember that East Coast tour that the 5 went on in 1968? Yeah, if they hadn't established that East Coast fan base, Dan wouldn't have bought that record 54 years ago. If Dan hadn't bought that record 54 years ago, I might never have known about the MC5. The women in this story do not get enough credit. Thank you to Betty Kahn, who hosted those parties in the early days. It seems whoever she was, she stuck it out the whole way through. Thank you to one of the most badass women in rock and roll history, Lenny Sinclair. Again, seeing so much of my favorite band through a woman's lens means more than you could ever know. Thank you to the unknown groupies who made all of those stage clothes, and thank you to the wives and girlfriends of the MC5, especially Sigrid and Becky. Sigrid was with Fred at the height of all of the White Panthers, Kick Out the Jams insanity, and Becky was raising kids through all of that. They were in the eye of the storm, tough as nails, and I respect the hell out of them. Thank you to the forgotten MVP of the MC5, Derek Hughes. I personally love his work with the Five and wish he'd gotten to cut a record with them. And finally, I want to thank the Five guys that started all this mess. Wayne, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Before my old laptop shit the bed, your photo was my background. Now you are the background of my new laptop, and you at the Grande with Rob is my phone wallpaper, so you're kinda like the patron saint of all my writing. I respect you deeply. Thank you for your music, for sharing your life story with us in your book. Thank you for Jail Guitar Doors and all your activism has done and continues to do for incarcerated people in America. You are a living legend, living proof that you can turn your life around. You, your wife, and your team have worked tirelessly over the years to keep the Five's legacy alive. If it weren't for you and your work, I wouldn't have made this. You have profoundly affected my life. It is a goddamn miracle you survived the 70s. Thank you for surviving. Rest in peace to Fred, a vanguard, a rebel, maybe the original punk. Never underestimate the rhythm guitarist, but you were so much more than that. You were honestly a co-lead with Wayne. You're the spirit of the Five. You are the reason they're called the Godfathers of Punk. But again, you were so much more than that. You were the creative force of the Five's later years, writing their most unique and impressive tunes. And two of my favorites, Sister Ann and Baby Won'tcha. Thank you for paving the way, both on your own and with Patty, another one of the most badass women in rock and roll history. And thank you for the Sonic suit, whatever that was.
Let's see, on a planet filled with madmen, lunatics, and crazy rock and roll musicians.
Rest in peace, Michael. I wish you'd gotten to finish your book. It was published. You can buy it, but it wasn't really finished, which is a damn shame. The more perspectives we have on all of this, the better. From everything I've seen of you, the interviews, the photos, the tattoos, the ranch in wherever the fuck Arizona, you just seemed so cool. The Detroit cowboy. You had that Gemini snark that all of us have. Thank you. I wish I got to know you. Thank you, Dennis, I think. I'm sorry your role in this story has been diminished. It's no doubt affected the way I wrote this video, though I really tried my best for it not to. I made an effort to seek your perspective out, and through my research, I got to know you better. The interviews you've given and your blog were among the most important, fascinating, heartbreaking, and hilarious insights I gathered. The story of that disgusting vomit-caked Pontiac, yeah, that came from Dennis. When you don't frustrate the hell out of me, I almost admire you. If it was 100% guaranteed we wouldn't get in a shouting match within the first 10 minutes, I maybe would want to sit down with you. Talk about God and science and acid and shit. I haven't talked about science in a long time. We're a lot more alike than I would care to admit. I may not always like you, but I do respect you. Thank you. And last, but most certainly not least, Rob. Oh, Rob. What more could I say that I haven't already said? I will look for you forever, everywhere. And that's it. That's a brief history of the MC5. What do you think? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet might tell you, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11, except for next one, after the insanity of putting this video together, the continuing insanity that took over my life for the better part of a year, I will be taking a break. For at least a week, maybe 2, you will still see a video from me in that time, but whatever it is, it sure as hell won't be Vinyl Monday. Thank you so much for watching, and until then, kick out the jams! Kick out the jams! Kick out the jams! Kick out the jams! Kick out the jams or get off the stage! Kick out the jams! Kick out the jams! Kick out the jams, motherfucker.